Chapter 1345. That Taoist sword was clean without any impurities, like the clearest spring water in the world. But when it came out, it was a different scene in Lin Sun's eyes. It was just one sword, but it seemed to turn into thousands of swords, densely packed like a torrent, filling the world, the vast mountains and rivers and the starry sky. It was everywhere, so it could reach everywhere. In a trance, the countless swords turned into layers of sword formations, covering the sky and the sun, killing the five elements and destroying everything. Swordsmanship was the fiercest way of attack. On the other hand, this sword strike was boundless, and omnipresent. It was fierce to the extreme and terrifying to the extreme. Boom! Lin Sun felt a stabbing pain in his eyes, and his mind was filled by the unparalleled sword intent. It seemed that the grand and vast voice resounded in his ears again. My sword originates from one and returns to infinity. All things are born by me, and all spirits are transformed by me. The sword is infinite and random. The essence of the sword is as numerous as the sands of the universe. This swordsmanship, created by me, is called Tai Xian. Cultivating the essence of Tai Xian in the heart aperture, and accumulating the Tai Xian sword intent in 840 million acupoints, waves of power of inheritance poured into Lin Sun's heart like a tide, making him fall into a kind of strange enlightenment. Tai Xian swordsmanship. This inheritance was created by Tai Xian, Sword Emperor, with his lifelong comprehension of the Great Way after he entered the Emperor realm. It was a veritable supreme sword scripture. To practice this method, the acupoints of the body were regarded as sword apertures, and the sword chi was smelted in them and tempered with a mysterious method. According to the description of Tai Xian Sword Emperor, there were 840 million acupoints in the human body, and each acupoint was like a divine treasure, as big as an abyss, like a furnace for cultivating swords. 840 million acupoints were 840 million furnaces for cultivating swords. To practice Tai Xian swordsmanship was to cultivate wisps of sword chi in each furnace, so as to quench the sword light, gather the sword intent, refine the sword soul, and transform the sword spirit. Controlling these 840 million sword chis was the grand, profound, true essence that was being nurtured in the heart aperture. When this technique was attained to the limit, then a single command in his heart would cause 840 million strands of sword chi to flash out in unison, and such a scene was sufficient to cover the entire starry sky. The unparalleled sharpness of the sword was unstoppable. The supreme divine might of the sword Tao was sufficient to slay ghosts and gods, destroy yin and yang, annihilate the five elements, split open the universe, and sever the ages. After a long time, when Lin Sun woke up from his meditation, he couldn't help but be shocked. Strong. He was simply too strong. The legacy left behind by the Tai Xian Sword Emperor was beyond imagination. It could even be called the sword scripture of Emperor's Path, a supreme technique. 840 million Tai Xian sword chi whizzed out at the same time and swept through the starry sky. How terrifying was that scene? After a while, Lin Sun calmed down and realized that it was impossible for him to cultivate Tai Xian Sword Sutra to the extreme, unless he could also step into the Emperor realm. However, Tai Xian Sword Scripture was broad, profound, and unpredictable. The cultivation methods of the Immortal Realm experts recorded in it were also incredible, which was enough for Lin Sun to enjoy. After all, it was left behind by a Sword Emperor. Just thinking about the two words Sword Emperor made one's heart tremble. With my current cultivation, I can only cultivate 3,000 sword chi at most. But it's enough. Tai Xian Sword Tao doesn't rely on quantity to win. In the Immortal Realm, 3,000 Tai Xian sword chi can be combined into one sword or a sword formation. Lin Sun noticed that there were many descriptions of sword formations in Tai Xian sword scripture. For example, in the Immortal Realm, one could cultivate 3 kinds of sword formations, namely, Great Void Killing Sword Formation, Great Destruction Killing Sword Formation, Boundless Killing Sword Formation, Every single sword formation corresponded to a different control technique, and it was extremely profound and terrifying. For example, once the Great Void killing sword formation was formed, a total of 720 sword chi would condense into a formation, and the whole formation would turn into nothingness, killing the enemy without any trace. Moreover, the quality of the sword chi determined the power of the sword formation. If the sword light could be refined, the power of the sword formation would be transformed. If the sword intent could be gathered, the power of the sword formation would be transformed. Until the sword soul and the sword spirit were refined, the power of the sword formation would be completely different. However, the sword soul could only be refined in the sage realm, and the sword spirit could only be refined in the emperor realm. In other words, Lin Sun could only condense the Taishian sword chi into the sword intent at most, but even so, the power was still shocking. After thoroughly understanding this, Lin Sun restrained his inner impulse and didn't immediately start to cultivate. Cultivation methods were not something that could be done in a short period of time. For example, the first step of cultivating Taishian sword scripture was to cultivate the essence of Taishian and cultivate it in the heart aperture. Only in this way could one control and use other sword chi. This was the introductory stage, but it was also the most critical and mysterious step, which determined the foundation of the sword scripture in the future. The so-called essence of Taishian, in fact, was to integrate one's own cultivation, essence, chi, and spirit into the power of the Great Way controlled by oneself. For example, if Lin Sun practiced this method, he would definitely choose to use the Devouring Star Way to melt his own cultivation, turn it into the essence of Taishian, and cultivate it in the heart aperture. Whoosh, Lin Sun took a deep breath and calmed himself down. Thinking of what he had seen just now, he finally understood. In this ultimate land of inheritance, the inheritance in the thousands of ancient stone statues was indeed not suitable for him. However, because he had inadvertently traveled to the primeval times and witnessed the scenes of the primeval times, he had coincidentally obtained the inheritance of the Taishian Sword Emperor. It turns out that Battle Emperor Wuyong and Taishian Sword Emperor knew each other. In the primordial age, the great figures who created this apex zone were all summoned by the Taishian Sword Emperor and gathered together. From this, we can see how powerful the Taishian Sword Emperor was back then. Moreover, after the creation of the Absolute Domain, these great figures in the primordial age all went to the starry ancient path one after another. Does this mean that when one's realm reached their level, he would also have to go to the starry ancient path to make a breakthrough? For a moment, Lin Sun was filled with emotion. The Absolute Domain was actually formed by thousands of sages who had joined hands to refine a wisp of the origin of chaos, just to open the absolute path for future generations. Who could have thought of this? The painstaking efforts of the sages should be cherished. Only in this way can I live up to what I have learned. Lin Sun's state of mind was firm. Then, he opened his eyes and stood up. He's awake. Demon Lin is awake. After sitting for a day, I wonder if he has obtained the inheritance. There was a burst of whispers. Lin Sun looked up and saw that near the ultimate battlefield, many experts were looking at him. Lin Sun ignored them and thought to himself, sitting for a day? He looked around and saw that there was no one in front of the thousands of ancient stone statues. Prince Xiaohao, Fairy Ruo Wu, and Yuan Fatian had all returned to the vicinity of the ultimate battlefield. Big Brother, Old Toad, and Big Blackbird waved at him from afar. Zhao Jingxian was also there, looking at him with a smile. Lin Sun walked over and asked, "Has the second round of battles begun?" He saw that in the battlefield, a young man in a purple robe was fighting with Wang Xuanyu, the successor of Tai Daoist sect. Yes, it began in the morning. The second round of battles is very cruel. A total of 54 people passed the first round, and each of them is a tough character. Old Toad frowned. The rules of the second round of battles are also confusing. Among the 54 people, anyone can enter the battlefield and challenge a strong opponent. The winner stays, and the loser is eliminated, Big Blackbird said quickly. the big black bird quickly said. But if that's the case, then it's not a big deal. The key is that the victor can either leave or stay on the battlefield and accept challenges from others. Lin Sun was stunned. Will there be any benefits after winning? Everyone shook their heads. No. The second round is the final battle. That's why we don't know how to get the Saint Guide. Mi Hungjin, Yi Mo, and others have all won the previous battles, but in the end, they didn't get the Saint Guide, Old Toad explained. Now, everyone is wondering if the second round of battles will be the same as the first round, where you need to win many battles in a row to get the chance to get the Saint Guide. Hearing this, Lin Sun suddenly remembered the conversation between Taishian, Sword Emperor, and Battle Emperor Wuyang. At that time, Taishian Sword Emperor had held a bronze box in his hand. It was 4 inches long and 2 fingers wide. It was only the size of a palm and looked like a heavy bronze flying sword. According to Taishian Sword Emperor, this bronze box was a collection of the insights left by a group of sages about the ultimate path of cultivation, which was extremely precious. Lin Sun guessed that what was sealed in this bronze box was most likely the so-called Saint Guide. At that time, Taishian Sword Emperor had said that this thing must not fall into the hands of those with bad intentions. For this reason, Taishian Sword Emperor had created this ultimate place of inheritance. Thinking of this, Lin Sun couldn't help but suspect that the second round of battles was actually a test of the minds of the strong. Only those who met the conditions left by Taishian Sword Emperor might be able to get the Saint Guide. The mind is related to the state of mind. If the mind is not right, it is destined to bring disaster to the world. This is by no means what Taishian Sword Emperor and the others want to see. But as for the state of mind, how can one meet the conditions to get the Saint Guide? For a moment, Lin Sun couldn't help but frown. He also had some doubts and couldn't figure it out. Boom! At this moment, there was a terrible collision sound in the battlefield. Wang Xuanyu defeated the purple-robed young man in one fell swoop and won the battle. But at the same time, Wang Xuanyu was also seriously injured and had no choice but to withdraw from the battlefield. What made him most bitter was that after he won, he also couldn't get the Saint Guide. Was it because he didn't have the fate of this creation? Wang Xuanyu sighed. Whoosh! At this moment, Ruo Wu Fairy's figure lightly landed in the field. For a moment, the atmosphere in the field suddenly became tense. They were all staring closely, wanting to see who Ruo Wu Fairy would choose as her opponent. At this time, among the 54 overlords who passed the first round of assessment, half of them had already fought, and so far no one had obtained the Saint Guide. However, no one expected that Ruo Wu Fairy would enter the battlefield at this time. After all, it seemed that Imperial Prince Xiaohao had also been watching. Ruo Wu Fairy's figure stood alone in the field. Her eyes swept across the crowd and finally fell on an area and stopped. When they saw the figure that her eyes were fixed on, there was suddenly an uproar. P.S. Additional updates sent. Brothers and sisters, come online and subscribe. You can receive the Novice Gift Pack, the Saint Guide, get the privilege of playing small roles, and let Demon God Lin take you flying in the book. Chapter 1346. Fairy Ruo Wu was dressed in a fiery red dress. Her skin was as white as snow, and her slender figure was surrounded by wisps of magnificent and hazy flames. She was a descendant of the vermilion bird with superb talent. She was a peerless girl in the upper 9 realms, admired by countless strong men like a fairy. However, she was quite cold and kept to herself. However, no one had expected that she would actually choose an opponent that no one had expected at this moment. Taoism Peer Lin Sun, please. Fairy Ruo Wu stood in the battlefield with a tranquil expression. She ignored the strange eyes around her and only looked at Lin Sun with her crystal-clear eyes. Many people also looked at Lin Sun. They couldn't help but wonder if Demon God Lin had a grudge against Fairy Ruo Wu. Otherwise, why didn't she choose others but Lin Sun? It was too risky. Anyone who chose Lin Sun as his opponent would bear great pressure. It seemed a little unwise. However, Fairy Ruo Wu did it. This was what surprised and shocked everyone. Sigh, has Big Brother's charm reached such a level? Alu showed an ambiguous expression. Humph, I only recognize Miss Zhao, and my sister-in-law can only be Miss Zhao. Old Toad snorted. Zhao Jingxian blushed and glared at Old Toad with a murderous look. If it weren't for the inappropriate occasion, she would have kicked Old Toad to death. You are too young. Isn't it normal for men to have 3 wives and 4 concubines since ancient times? I support Lin Sun to indulge in women and enjoy himself. That's the real romantic, a role model for our generation. The big black bird shook its head. Bang! Lin Sun slapped its head. This guy was courting death. Didn't he see Zhao Jingxuan's face was as black as the bottom of a pot? Then, Lin Sun walked towards the battlefield. Although he was a little surprised, he wouldn't be afraid to fight. I like to see if he will show mercy. Behind him, Zhao Jingxuan's voice sounded with a hint of suspicion. Lin Sun only felt a chill on his back. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He was not afraid of slanderous shadows. How could he be afraid of this? As Lin Sun entered the battlefield, all eyes gathered on him, full of expectation. One of them was a peerless prodigy ranked 2nd on the Prodigy Gold leaderboard. The other was the undefeatable demon god who had once defeated Yun Qingbai. What kind of intense battle would unfold between the two of them? Please. In the field, Lin Sun looked calm, and the chi around him was running. Regardless of whether I can get the Saint's Guide or not, being able to fight with Brother Lin has always been my wish. I hope Brother Lin won't hold back. On the other side, Fairy Rual Wu's voice was clear, like the tinkling of spring water, resounding throughout the field. Her long hair fluttered in the wind, and her appearance was out of this world. As a descendant of the vermilion bird, she naturally possessed a peerless elegance. Lin Sun smiled. Okay, Miss Zhao, take a look. Big Brother is flirting with that little girl. You must discipline him in the future. Don't let him be too presumptuous. Old Toad said quickly. Zhao Jingxian snapped. Hurry up and shut up. Look, you're angry now, aren't you? I knew you couldn't stand it either. Unfortunately, as your brother, I can't control Big Brother. Otherwise, I would definitely stand up for you. Old Toad sighed with emotion. Zhao Jingxian gritted her teeth and had the impulse to strangle this guy to death. The battle was about to break out. Could he stop for a while? In the field, the battle broke out. Fairy Rual Wu's figure was light, but her momentum was as swift as a fire. Her slender hand gently waved, and the magnificent light, rain, turned into a long whip of law, striking down. Crack! The void burst into pieces like a piece of paper, unable to withstand the whip of the power of law at all. The unparalleled force made many strong men outside the field feel their hearts beat fiercely and gasp. Lin Sun stepped forward without retreating or evading. He clenched his palm and fingers into a fist and confronted it head-on. Bang! The deafening sound of collision rang out. The long whip, condensed by the law, like dancing lightning, flickered flexibly. In an instant, it turned into a circle of whip shadows, binding Lin Sun's whole body. There was a burst of exclamation in the field. Not bad. As soon as Lin Sun's figure spread out, the circle of whip shadows that bound his body exploded inch by inch, unable to restrain his movements at all. Boom! At the same time, he punched out. The fist force was vast, simple, and vigorous, shaking the earth and stirring up the wind and clouds, whistling away. In an instant, the two had fought hundreds of times. One was as graceful as a vermilion bird, dancing above the sky, and the other was like a demon descending to the world, pushing forward and staging a peerless battle. Outside the field, there were constant exclamations, and the hearts of the crowd were in turmoil. They paid close attention to the battle, lest they missed any detail. Even Xiao Hao, the prince, was watching the battle carefully. Miss Rual Wu, if you don't use your full strength, you will lose this battle. In the field, Lin Sun's clear voice sounded. His body was shining with Taoist light, his long hair flying in the air, and his momentum was unparalleled. Although they had already seen Lin Sun's demeanor when he killed Yun Qingbai, they were still amazed and shocked when they saw him attack again. They had to admit that Demon Lin was getting stronger and stronger. The art of burning the world. There was a solemn look on Rual Wu's face, and around her body, a flame halo emerged. The The divine ring was completely round and divine. It contained a kingdom of fire within it. Strands of crystalline and dazzling divine flames seethed and blazed within it. It was simply like a sun had appeared, and it seemed capable of incinerating the sky. The innate Taoism of vermilion bird. In the field, all the heroes were moved, and their hearts trembled. It was said that in ancient times, there was a holy king of vermilion bird who used this method to burn down mountains and rivers, evaporate a vast ocean in an instant, and turn it into a dry and cracked land. At this time, this Taoism was deduced by Ruo Wu. Boom! In a vast battlefield, the flame halo was like the sun, and the flame poured down like the sea, covering the world. Standing in it, Ruo Wu was like a god of fire. This overbearing blow made many strong men feel cold, and their eyes were stinging. They were so scared that their souls almost came out of their bodies. It was too strong. If they were in the field, they would be burned to ashes in an instant, and their bodies and souls would be destroyed. Will he be okay? Zhao Jingxian was nervous, and her heart was in her throat. After her awakening, she only knew that Lin Sun was not what he used to be, and he was extremely powerful. But now it was the first time that she really saw a fierce battle between him and a peerless figure like Ruo Wu. Seeing this scene, how could she not be nervous? Old Toad was a little surprised. He looked at Zhao Jingxian with a strange face and said, "In the past, you were the calmest, and you had absolute confidence in your big brother's ability. Why are you suddenly worried about personal gains and losses? It's normal for women who fall in love to have a screw loose in their heads," Alu commented. Zhao Jingxian was ashamed and angry. Her pretty face was burning, and she lifted her leg to give each of them a kick. At this time, there was a burst of exclamations in the field. In the battlefield covered by the rolling flame, Lin Sun's figure was like an immovable rock, impervious to water and fire, and invincible. Boom! Rolling waves of fire, Taoist light, and the power of the law poured down. It was so terrible that it was enough to burn the sky and destroy the earth, but it couldn't get close to Lin Sun. Moreover, there was a big abyss floating around him. When all the power surged towards him, it was swallowed up and annihilated. The big abyss, Prince Xiaohao sighed softly. How could he not have heard of such a talent? Unfortunately, he had only heard of it, and he couldn't tell how powerful the big abyss was, because this talent was like an ethereal rumor in ancient times. It was so mysterious that it had almost never appeared before. Flashing light fire dance. In the field, Fairy Ruo Wu shouted. Her figure was filled with endless dazzling light, and streams of flames flew out like flowing light. This was her trump card, which she rarely used. If she still couldn't break Lin Sun's defense, she could only admit defeat. Rumble, flowing lights shot out violently on the battlefield, and it was like a myriad of flaming gods were charging forward. The boundlessly terrifying might they revealed caused the heavens and the earth to dim down, and it seemed as if the heavens and the earth had been completely incinerated. It turns out that this is her most powerful attack. Many peerless overlords felt cold. Some of them had fought against Fairy Ruo Wu before, but it was their first time witnessing such a domineering attack from Fairy Ruo Wu. Good. Suddenly, Lin Sun let out a long roar that shook the whole field. Looking from afar, he was like a big abyss emerging from the earth. It was boundless and deep, and it could swallow everything. Some powerhouses almost bit their tongues, because in their perception, the big abyss really seemed to be swallowing the world. After the earth-shattering collision, some spectators lost their minds and stood there in a daze. As for Prince Xiaohao, Yi Mo, and Mi Hongjin, they all looked shocked. Their pupils contracted, and there was an uncontrollable shock between their eyebrows. Because Ruo Wu was defeated. In this most powerful confrontation, her strongest trump card was crushed and destroyed by Lin Sun like a withered leaf in the wind. Her pretty face was pale, and she staggered and almost fell from the void. On the other hand, Lin Sun's body was like colored glass, clear and otherworldly, and he was unscathed. "Brother Lin, is this your strongest attack?" After a long silence, Fairy Rual Wu took a deep breath and looked at Lin Sun from afar. She asked seriously. Lin Sun shook his head. Fairy Rual Wu's body trembled slightly, and there was a hint of bitterness on her beautiful pale face. She said, I understand. Thank you for showing mercy, Brother Lin. Then, her figure flickered and she flew out of the battlefield. At this moment, the surroundings were deathly silent, perfectly silent, and tempestuous waves of emotions surged in the hearts of everyone. The final strike wasn't Fiend Celestial Lin's strongest attack. Didn't this mean that he still had strength left that he hadn't used? The meaning of this was too frightening. In the distance, Zhao Jingxian was relieved. She revealed a relaxed and happy smile, and her crystal-clear eyes were full of smiles and ripples of extraordinary splendor. This guy is still as powerful as before. Aren't you happy? Alu and Old Toad craned their heads. The smile on Zhao Jingshuan's lips froze. There was an indescribable impulse in her heart. Should she suggest that Lin Sun cut ties with these two guys? P.S. Go out at night and update twice in a row. Chapter 1347. Zhao Jingshuan's expression suddenly became calm. He glanced at Old Toad and Alu coldly. Do you want me to talk to Lin Sun? Instantly, the two of them were terrified and ran away like a wisp of smoke. Zhao Jingshuan's lips curled into a complacent smile. He didn't believe that he couldn't deal with the two bitches. The wicked would be tortured by the wicked. Let your elder brother be the wicked. Can't he subdue you two little devils? There was a sigh in the field. After this duel, the same attraction didn't appear either. Did it not exist at all? Whoosh! Suddenly, before Lin Sun could decide whether to stay or leave, a golden figure rushed into the battlefield. Brother Lin, I want to take this opportunity to fight with you. It was the young golden-winged roc. His eyes were shining with golden light, and his breath was frightening. There was a stir in the field. Everyone was surprised. What was going on? First, Rual Wu Fairy, then the young golden-winged roc. Both of them wanted to fight with Lin Sun. It was too abnormal. This is the real top tycoon. He has invincible spirit in his heart. Whether he wins or loses, his courage is commendable and his momentum can't be humiliated. Someone sighed with emotion. Now, many people had realized that whether it was Rual Wu Fairy or the young golden-winged roc, they didn't care about the same attraction at all. They just wanted to take this opportunity to have a fair duel with Lin Sun. This was the mentality of the real strong. No matter whether they won or lost, they dared to fight. Such a state of mind and courage was beyond the reach of ordinary people. Since you are here, how can I not fight with you? Lin Sun smiled casually. Since he started his cultivation, all the fights he had experienced were extremely bloody and fierce. There were few opportunities for him to have a fair duel with his peers. He didn't want to win or lose, but he wanted to have a good time. This feeling also made Lin Sun's fighting spirit boil and his blood burn. Whoosh! The young golden-winged roc flashed and suddenly turned into a real golden-winged roc. Its golden wings were flowing with divine golden light, which was as sharp as a pair of sky-splitting blades. Its feathers were like divine swords. When it flapped, it tore the void into pieces and made a loud explosion. Its power was monstrous. It was rumored that the golden-winged great roc captured dragons for food. Its ferocious nature reigned supreme in the world, and its natural talent was so great that it shook the ages. Such beings were true geniuses favored by the heavens. Since they were born, they possessed reserves and strength that far exceeded ordinary cultivators, and they could be said to be boundlessly terrifying. Lin Sun, our golden-winged roc bloodline, has the ability to capture gods and tear ghosts apart. Be careful. Amidst its cold and arrogant voice, the little golden-winged roc king flapped its wings. It seemed as if it was teleporting, and its speed was extremely shocking. Whoosh! Caught off guard, Lin only felt a dazzling golden wing chopping towards him like a heavenly saber. It was too late for him to dodge, so he had to face it head-on. With a bang, his figure was forced to retreat several steps, and his arm was torn open by the sharp chi. The crowd was shocked. No one thought that the young rock, who was ranked lower than Goddess Raoul Wu on the Heaven's favorite gold leaderboard, would be able to hurt demon god Lin with one strike. So fast, some people's hearts palpitated. They could see that the speed of the young rock was almost comparable to the space diversion that only sages could master. Ha ha, maybe I'm not as good as you in terms of combat power, but you're not as fast as me. The young rock laughed. His figure was like a flickering ray of golden light, leaving a series of shadows in the huge battlefield. No matter how many strong cultivators tried to capture him with their divine senses, they couldn't lock his figure at all. It was too fast. It was dazzling, and it was so uncomfortable that they almost coughed up blood. Even Lin Sun had to admit that he was slightly inferior to the young golden-winged rock in terms of speed. But so what if he was fast? He could break it with his own strength. Boom! Lin Sun took a deep breath, and the power around him rose steadily. His whole body was glowing, and his spirit was burning like a chaotic furnace. In an instant, he threw out thousands of punches in a row. Every single fist force was condensed, heavy, and vast. They were like numerous divine rays of light that tore through the sky and smashed through the surroundings. Rumble! In the entire battlefield, the void seemed to be collapsing, and large pieces of the ground were shattering. The fist energies were like pythons in a chaotic world, and they filled the entire world. In an instant, the afterimages left behind by the young golden-winged rock king burst and disappeared like bubbles. Bang! After that, a muffled collision resounded in the surroundings. A wave of energy swept out, and then the young golden-winged rock king staggered and revealed himself from an area. He was furious, and he once again used his swift movement to attack Lin Sun. His wings were like heavenly sabers, extremely sharp. His claws were a pair of terrifying weapons that could kill dragons and snakes, and they had amazing lethality. But no matter how he attacked, Lin Sun stood where he was motionless. He only unleashed his punches and attacked in all directions. The thousands of punches were released, covering the entire battlefield. Not only did they destroy all of the young rock's attacks, but they also forced him into a disadvantageous position. In everyone's eyes, Lin Sun's punches were like a raging ocean. No matter how fast the young rock was, he could only struggle in the ocean, and from time to time, he would be hit by the waves. Bang! 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 A series of terrifying collisions rang out. Fist marks appeared on the little golden-winged rock king's body. Blood and golden feathers fell in a messy manner. This is called breaking all laws with brute force. Some experts were shocked. Only Fiend Celestial Lin possessed such immense and peerless combat strength. He was able to suppress the young golden-winged rock king in such an absolute manner. If it were anyone else, it would be impossible. This was because the young rock was not only fast, but his strength was equally astonishing. But now he was being suppressed. One could imagine how abnormal Lin Sun's strength was. I'm not fighting anymore. Suddenly, the young rock's exasperated cry rang out in the field. Then, his figure flashed and returned to his human form. But his nose and face were swollen, his eyes were black and blue, and his hair was disheveled. He looked miserable. These injuries were caused by Lin Sun's punches. Lin Sun stopped and asked with a smile, "Why don't you fight anymore? After all, the space on the battlefield is limited. I can't give full play to my advantages. If it were in the outside world, do you think you could suppress me like this?" The young rock was indignant. When everyone heard this, they pondered for a moment and agreed with him. Indeed, with the little gold-winged rock king's speed that was comparable to teleportation, the heavens and the earth could become a stage for it to teleport around. So who could possibly suppress it? You're wrong. No matter how fast you are, you can't resist the suppression of power. You could try if you don't believe me. Lin Sun said casually. Then let's try. Suddenly, the young rock rose into the sky and turned into a golden-winged rock again. With a flap of his wings, he rushed to the depths of the clouds outside the battlefield. Come on, he shouted in the clouds, extremely conceited. Damn it, when this guy is proud, his face is so annoying, Old Toad shouted. If you don't accept it, come and hit me. The young rock sneered. Buzz. At this moment, Lin Sun, who was standing in the ultimate battlefield, suddenly moved. He stretched out his hand and gently stabbed in the void. Boundless world. The third move of the void-breaking finger involved the mystery of space. Although Lin Sun couldn't understand its essence, its power could be used by Lin Sun. In the clouds high in the sky, the young rock was sneering complacently. Suddenly, a finger force appeared out of thin air and crushed his body. Bang! Like being hit by a mountain, his figure suddenly sank and fell down. No matter how hard he flapped his wings, he couldn't stop falling. The young rock was shocked and angry. Bang! Another strand of force surged out and fiercely stabbed onto his head, causing his vision to darken while he was almost unable to catch his breath. He let out a shrill cry before smashing onto the ground with a thump, and his entire body twitched while smoke and dust suffused the air. This was Boundless World. No matter where you were, as long as you were locked on, you couldn't escape the possibility of being killed. Everyone present was dumbstruck and gasped. Such an inconceivable Tao art simply treated space as nothing, and it could practically only be grasped in the hands of a saint. But now, Lin Sun had used it. Old Toad laughed. Haha, everyone saw it. This guy begged to be hit. How despicable. I've never seen such a despicable rock. The heroes in the field had strange expressions. The young rock was so ashamed and resentful that he wanted to hide in a crack in the ground. Just now, he had been showing off, thinking that Lin Sun was no match for him in terms of speed. Unexpectedly, Lin Sun didn't even move and just stretched out a finger to strike him down. This was too embarrassing. Young rock, thanks for letting me win. In the ultimate battlefield, Lin Sun smiled and cupped his hands. Humph! The young rock snorted coldly and looked at Yuan Fatian in the distance. Yuan Fatian was stunned for a moment, and then he understood that this was to ask him to fight against Lin Sun. But he didn't want to go. Monkey, are we brothers or not? The young rock's face darkened. With a bitter face, Yuan Fatian braced himself and agreed. Brother Lin, I'll fight with you. He rushed into the battlefield in a righteous manner. I don't ask sages to guide me. I just want to put an end to the small frictions between us. Didn't we put an end to it long ago? Lin Sun was stunned. Monkey, do you want to drink again? Come on, let's fight for another 3,000 rounds. Whoever is drunk is a coward. Old Toad and Alu shouted in unison. Yuan Fatian's lips twitched. He took a deep breath and was about to say something. At this moment, he seemed to notice something. He looked at Lin Sun up and down for a moment, and his face suddenly changed. He suddenly exclaimed, You've refined your body? Aren't you worried about encountering the forbidden Tao test? As soon as these words came out, the whole field was silent. Before, everyone knew that Lin Sun practiced both qi refining and soul refining, but they didn't know that he had also embarked on the road of refining his body. If he had 3 kinds of Tao at the same time, he would be punished by heaven. From ancient times to the present, no matter who did this, no matter how powerful he would be obliterated by the forbidden Tao test. Prince Xiaohao and Fairy Ruo Wu were also stunned. Their eyes flashed with divine light, as if they couldn't believe it. How could a peerless figure like Lin Sun not know the horror of the forbidden Tao test? But why did he do this? Chapter 1348. There was silence in the field. For a moment, everyone looked at Lin Sun in disbelief. The Tao test. How horrible it was. But Lin Sun had 3 paths of Tao. Wouldn't he be in trouble? A peerless figure like him was almost invincible in the absolute realm and had a promising future that was beyond the reach of others. But if he was killed by the Tao test, how unfortunate it would be. Since our cultivation is against nature and Tao, we should not be afraid of any obstacles. Lin Sun looked calm. There were almost no enemies in the field, so he didn't mind talking about what he knew about the pursuit of Tao. Now that the great world shrouds the ancient desolation domain, it is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for us to rise. Everything in this world has become different. Since the absolute way of Tao has appeared in this world, why can't the Tao test be broken? This absolute realm was left for us by thousands of sages in primitive times with all their efforts. Now that we have set foot on the absolute realm, why should we be afraid of tribulations and difficulties? There was no generosity in his voice, but there was a calm and firm force in it. It was so powerful that all the heroes present were moved. Brother Lin is so bold. In the distance, Prince Xiaohao praised. Everyone deeply agreed, and they were moved in their hearts. Perhaps it's precisely because of his courage to be fearless towards all hardships and dangers that allowed Devil God Lin to attain his current accomplishment step by step from a cultivator from the lower dimensions, right? In the distance, Zhao Jingxian smiled sweetly. From the very beginning, she knew that Lin's son was such a person. Then, do you dare to fight with me in body refining? Yuan Fatian suddenly proposed. Don't worry. I will fight with you in the same body refining realm. I promise I won't take advantage of you. Speaking of this, he couldn't help but show a confident look. He was never afraid of fighting with anyone in body refining. When they heard this, it was Old Toad, the big black bird, and Alu who had strange expressions on their faces as they looked at Yuan Fatian with a hint of pity. Did this silly monkey really think that Lin was easy to bully in body refining? Why do you look like this? Zhao Jingxian was puzzled. The Old Toad grinned and told Zhao Jingxian about how Aluzing and Lin didn't gain the upper hand in the battle of body refining. Immediately, Zhao Jingxuan's expression became a little strange. Presently, Big Brother has already attained the Death King realm in the Tao of body refinement, and he's even undergoing the tempering and tests of the myriad ancient tablet to obtain the lifetime worth of knowledge and experience of body refinement from the divine elephant martial emperor. If Yuan Fatian thinks that he possesses the strength to crush Big Brother in the 9 Clarity Saint Physique technique, then he's gravely mistaken. Alu suppressed his excitement and transmitted his voice as well. Zhao Jingxian was taken aback, and there was a trace of pity in her eyes as she looked at Yuan Fatian, exactly the same as Old Toad and the others. Are you sure? In the field, Lin Sun said with interest. I was the one who taught you this body refinement technique. Could it be that I'm afraid of you? Yuan Fatian was very conceited and snorted coldly. I'm not afraid to tell you that the advantages outweigh the disadvantages of sparring with me. If you can get some advice from me, I guarantee that you can practice the 9 Clarity Saint Physique technique more smoothly. Of course, if you're worried about failure, it doesn't matter. The audience was in an uproar. Only now did they know that the body refining technique Demon God Lin practiced was actually the supreme inheritance of Yu Yang. No wonder Yuan Fatian dared to be so confident and disdainful. As a descendant of Yu Yang, he was indeed qualified to give Lin Sun advice on the body refining technique he was best at. However, this was, after all, a duel in the ultimate battlefield. If Lin Sun failed, he would no longer have the chance to get the Saint Guide. Would Demon God Lin agree? All eyes were fixed on Lin Sun. Brilliant! In the distance, the golden-winged rock dynasty gave Yuan Fatian a thumbs up. Even if Lin Sun defeated Yuan Fatian in the duel without using the body refining technique, at least he would leave the impression that he was not as good as Yuan Fatian in body refining. Yuan Fatian was expressionless and crossed his arms in front of his chest, but there was a trace of complacency in his eyes. Originally, he was forced to enter the field, but now, even he was amazed at his own wit. All right, I was just about to ask you for advice on the way of body refining. But to his surprise, as well as everyone else's, Lin Sun actually agreed. For a moment, everyone was stunned. Only Old Toad and the rest had increasingly strange expressions. Big Brother was planning to do something naughty. Good. After a moment of shock, Yuan Fatian's heroic spirit rose as he looked at Lin Sun with disdain and pride. Don't worry, since I've agreed to give you advice, I definitely won't hide anything. However, if you lose, don't blame me. Lin Sun nodded. Of course. Boom! As soon as he said that, chi and blood surged around him like boiling lava. Every inch of his skin glowed with a jade-like luster, and his power was astonishing. The peak of body refining, the King realm. There was an uproar as everyone was extremely surprised. In the past, they had never imagined that Demon God Lin would have such profound attainments in body refining. Even Yuan Fatian was stunned. If he remembered correctly, it had only been a few months since he taught Lin Sun the cultivation method of nine-purity body refining technique. At that time, Lin Sun hadn't even entered the threshold of body refining, but now he had actually stepped into the king realm. This level of advancement was indeed shocking. But thinking about it, Lin Sun's attainments in qi refining and soul refining had reached the seventh retribution of longevity realm. His physical strength had long been extremely strong, and he also cultivated a supreme, secret method like nine-purity holy body refining technique. It was normal for his progress to have such a shocking transformation. If your foundation is not solid, the earth will shake and the sky will shake. If you covet the improvement of body refining realm, it will leave a great hidden danger to your cultivation. Before the battle began, Yuan Fatian decided to give Lin Sun some advice. Lin Sun was startled and said, "I understand. Let's fight." Ungrateful? Well, when I defeat you in the same realm, you will know whether I'm right or wrong. Yuan Fatian snorted coldly, very dissatisfied with Lin Sun's attitude. He was giving advice to Lin Sun. If it were someone else, he wouldn't bother to pay attention. Boom! Although he thought so in his heart, his figure suddenly produced a roar, like the raging of wind and thunder. His robust body was covered in a layer of dazzling and resplendent clear-colored light of the Tao, and it was crystalline as if it was made from translucent jade. King Realm, void refining pure battle body, void clear hegemonic seal. Let me see how good you are in this realm. With a loud shout, Yuan Fatian stepped into the air, domineering like a demon. The power emitted by his body alone shattered the void and made the world pale. Wheel light seal. He punched out, and a palm print like a wheel condensed, with the momentum of illuminating the universe and dominating the world. Buzz. Almost at the same time, Lin Sun's eyes lit up, and he also punched out. It was also the wheel light seal of the void, clear hegemonic seal. For a moment, the whole audience looked sideways. In the ultimate battlefield, it was like two divine suns, rising in the void and then colliding. Boom! The world shook, and it was a dazzling scene. In the aftermath of the terrible power, two figures retreated dozens of meters in the void. It's a tie? Everyone was shocked. They had thought that Yuan Fatian, a master of body refining, would absolutely be invincible and occupy an absolute advantage, just like a grandmaster teaching his disciples. Unexpectedly, he didn't get the upper hand in the first collision. Yuan Fatian's eyes flashed, and he was a little surprised in his heart. He said, "Yes, you have already understood some of the essence of this realm, but you are still very immature." Boom! He attacked again, and the power was much stronger than before. Obviously, he didn't intend to hold back anymore. Mountain pushing seal. Looking from a distance, a fist print appeared in front of Yuan Fatian, like pushing an ancient mountain forward, rumbling and crushing the void, extremely overbearing and powerful. But almost at the same time, Lin Sun also displayed this move. The fist print condensed, like pushing a deep mountain, broke the void, and oppressed the world. Boom! In that instant, everyone felt as if two divine mountains were colliding with each other. Endless rumbling explosions resounded between the two forces. The explosion and sweeping Tao light poured out from between the two like a tide. After that, the two figures intersected and stood in confrontation from afar. However, Yuan Fatian's face carried a wisp of bewilderment, and he felt angry and embarrassed in his heart. He still wasn't able to suppress Lin Sun with this attack. How is this possible? The nine-purity holy body technique was the ultimate technique of his lineage, and Yuan Fatian was confident that he was invincible in the world with his attainments in it. But now, Lin Sun's performance surprised him. The surroundings were in an uproar, and the little golden-winged rock king even shouted, "Monkey, are you still holding back at a time like this? Quickly suppress him. This is the best opportunity to defeat him." In the distance, the old toad and the others couldn't help but laugh and gloat. This monkey still doesn't understand that he's looking for trouble? All of this sounded like a form of mockery and distrust when it entered Yuan Feishan's ears, causing his face to turn slightly gloomy, and he gritted his teeth without end. Again, he shouted explosively, and he displayed the strength of the Extinction King realm to the extreme. He seemed like he was going berserk, and his murderous aura was boundlessly terrifying. Yu Fong was an extremely terrifying existence from the primeval times, and he was extremely arrogant. Once he went berserk, it was sufficient to make even ghosts and gods fear him. At this moment, even though Yuan Fatian hadn't gone completely berserk, he wasn't far from it. Lin Sun's eyes grew brighter, and he took a deep breath before he circulated the strength of his body to the extreme as he charged forward. Rumble. For a time, the ultimate battlefield was filled with deafening explosions. The figures of the two of them were like primeval gods and devils colliding with each other, and their surging vital energy and blood caused the heavens and the earth to be thrown into chaos. However, to the astonishment of the distant spectators, Yuan Fatian, who should have occupied an absolute advantage in such a peerlessly intense battle, actually hadn't gained the slightest advantage from the beginning until the end. It was even to the extent that in terms of power, it was unable to conceal Lin Sun's sharpness. Monkey, hurry up and use your fucking full strength. The little golden-winged rock king in the distance was unable to maintain his composure any longer, and he shouted incessantly. In the battlefield, Yuan Feishan's expression was extremely gloomy, and he was madly furious in his heart. At this point in the battle, how could he dare not use his full strength? But the crux of the matter was that no matter how he charged forward, not to mention suppressing Lin Sun, he was utterly unable to do anything to Lin Sun. What could he do? He was filled with despair. Chapter 1349. Lin Sun, on the other hand, became stronger and stronger as he fought. After all cultivation was not as good as actual combat. Yuan Fatian also practiced the 9 purity holy body tactics. Fighting with Yuan Fatian allowed Lin Sun to have a more intuitive insight into the mystery of this secret method of body refining. Moreover, he had been tempered and tested in the Wanxiang ancient steel, which was equivalent to indirectly obtaining the inheritance of divine elephant martial emperor. This meant that he possessed 2 extremely supreme body refinement inheritances on the path towards the Tao in body refinement. Due to his origin spiritual veins, he had an almost innate advantage in body tempering. The rapid advancement of one's body refinement cultivation was inextricably linked to the assistance of the origin spirit vein. At this time, if Yuan Fatian still thought that Lin Sun was just a beginner in body refining, he would be sorely mistaken. In fact, at this time, Yuan Fatian had indeed deeply realized that the advantage he relied on did not exist at all. In the battle of the same realm, Lin Sun had a foundation and strength not inferior to Yuan Fatian at all, and his understanding of body refining was also amazing. This guy is simply a monster. Yuan Fatian had a kind of unspeakable depression in his heart. He thought of Yin Qingbai. At that time, on the demon shopping platform, Yin Qingbai's pride was broken by Lin Sun with the power of sword and gave him the most serious blow. Yuan Fatian felt that at this moment he was like Yin Qingbai at that time. When he thought of what he had said before Dojan, his face was filled with shame and anger, and he felt too ashamed to show his face. It was really not a good feeling. If he had known this, he shouldn't have agreed to fight with Lin Sun, the monster. Yuan Fatian thought angrily in his heart. Suddenly, Lin Sun stopped fighting and retreated far away. Yuan Fatian was stunned, but Lin Sun said with a smile, "Don't go too far. If you continue to fight, I'm afraid I will have to use other means." There was an uproar in the field, but Yuan Fatian was stunned. After a while, he said with mixed feelings, "The grievances between you and me are completely over. You don't owe me anything anymore." After that, he turned around and left the battlefield. Big Brother is still too kind. If it were me, I would beat him to pieces. Old Toad muttered in the distance. Both he and Alu could tell that Lin Sun intended to save Yuan Feishan's face, so as not to embarrass Yuan Fatian and embarrass him. In next to no time, many experts in the surroundings recovered from their shock, and their expressions became complicated while a single phrase appeared in their minds. Monster. Before, everyone subconsciously thought that Lin Sun had almost no chance of winning against Yuan Fatian in body refining. But what happened next made them gasp in amazement. Lin Sun might not have passed the first longevity test in the body refining realm, but in this realm, he could be said to be peerlessly stunning and terrifyingly powerful. Yuan Fatian was a descendant of Yu Yang, and he possessed extraordinary talent and an extraordinarily terrifying physique. But even then, he was merely on par with Lin Sun. Brother Lin, do you still have the strength to fight? Suddenly, Mi Hongjin spoke with a clear gaze that carried a trace of unconcealable battle intent. Please. Lin Sun was stunned, and then said with a smile. Clang! Wielding his sword, Mi Hongjin stepped into the battlefield in a graceful manner. He said, Brother Lin, there's no need to hold back. Let's have a good fight. All right. Lin Sun smiled casually. The experts in the field looked at each other in dismay. This was to be a revolving battle. However, such a revolving battle was almost unseen in the past. Looking at the experts Lin Sun had fought since he stepped into the field, Fairy Ruo Wu, the young golden-winged roc, Yuan Fatian. Which one of them was not a peerless overlord ranked at the top of the Tianjiao Golden List? In ordinary times, people like them would not even bother to engage in a revolving battle. After all, there was almost no one in the world worthy of their efforts. But obviously, Lin Sun was an exception. Isn't this bullying? In the distance, Alu frowned. Do you think it will damage Lin Sun's reputation, even if he is defeated in such a situation? Zhao Jingxian asked in reply. Alu's frown eased at once. Even if Lin Sun lost, it was destined not to damage his big brother's reputation. After all, who couldn't see how terrible this revolving battle was? Alu even thought, what if his big brother could win every battle and become the absolute overlord of the ultimate battlefield? Just thinking about it made Alu's blood boil, and he became excited. Boom! On the battlefield, the battle broke out. Mi Hung was really the leader of the young generation of Sun Moon Palace. There was no doubt that his combat power was strong. In the upper 9 realms these years, he had already entered the first sequence of overlords. This could be seen from his ranking in the 8th place of the Tianjiao Golden List. What Mi Hongjin practiced was the 8 tempering secrets of Sun Moon, which was inherited from ancient times. In addition, he had other opportunities in the upper 9 realms and obtained the mantle left by a sage king in primitive times, which made his combat power unparalleled and eye-catching. But after 30 minutes, Mi Hung was defeated. He was defeated by Lin Sun's instinct of spring and autumn. Brother Lin's combat power has reached a level that we can only admire. After this battle, although I was defeated by you, it made me have an epiphany in the battle. Thank you very much. Mi Hongjin looked solemn and admiring. Thank you for letting me win. Lin Sun nodded slightly. This time, before anyone spoke, Lin Sun suddenly raised his head, glanced at the audience like lightning, and said, Who else wants to fight with me? Please come forward. His voice was flat, but it was overflowing with heroism. At this time, he was also full of fighting spirit, and his blood was completely ignited. At the moment, he had nothing else to ask for but a good fight. As for the so-called Saint Attraction, it was no longer important. This was indeed a rare opportunity. Gathered in the field were the top talents, overlords, talents, and saintesses in the world. If they missed this opportunity, it would be difficult to encounter it again in the future. Big brother, you're so bold. Old Toad shouted. Alu and the big blackbird were also very excited. This kind of scene was too rare to see. It's not your fight, so you can make a fuss. Zhao Jingxian rolled her eyes. Deep in her heart, she was also emotional. The demeanor Lin Sun showed was enough to fascinate any woman. After all, who didn't want their sweetheart to be a peerless hero? Zhao Jingxian was no exception. Brother Lin, I'm willing to take a sword from you. Moha appeared, his eyes as sharp as a sword, and made a request. Okay. Lin Sun didn't refuse. Next, The crowd once again witnessed the no-return sword technique. Even though it was the second time they saw it, they were still stunned. The style of this sword was enough to shock the world. Yi Moha was defeated. He staggered after being hit by the sword. The sword chi invaded his body, and he coughed up blood. But his eyes were bright, and he laughed, "Take this sword, and I will have no regrets." At this time, Lin Sun's face was a little pale. Although he was not injured in many consecutive battles, his physical strength was constantly consumed. However, his back was still straight, and his expression was still disdainful and calm. "Next, who is willing to fight with me?" His voice rumbled, resounding through the whole field. Looking at Lin Sun at this time, many people felt a trace of admiration in their hearts. Maybe this was the real strong. "I'll fight. Brother Lin, please." "Great. Today, no matter who wins or loses, I just want to fight with you." In the following time, Sword Devil Yi Chun, Laughing Heaven, Wang Xuanyu, and other strong people came to the field one after another, staging fierce battles one after another. In the process, Lin Sun was inevitably injured. Soon, his body was stained with blood, and his face became paler and paler. Only his figure never collapsed. Alu, the big black bird, and the others were silent, feeling nervous. They all saw that Lin Sun's physical strength was consumed more and more, and he was injured more and more. It seemed that he would be beaten down at any time. Zhao Jingshuan's jade-like hands, which were hidden in her sleeves, clenched tightly. She pursed her lips and stared fixedly at the blood-soaked figure in the arena. Her heart was filled with shock, pride, but there was also uncontrollable worry. There are only a few people left. She glanced at the field and thought silently. When Lin Sun entered the battlefield, about half of the 54 strong people who entered the second round had already fought. At this time, Lin Sun had fought 17 battles in succession and defeated 17 peerless overlords. Now, there were only 3 people left who had a chance to fight. Among them, the most difficult one was Prince Xiaohao. From the beginning to the end, he had been watching the battle as if he was not tempted by the same attraction. But who could guarantee that he would not enter the field to challenge? If Lin Sun fought with Prince Xiaohao in his heyday, people would not worry too much. But the point was that Lin Sun had consumed a lot of energy and was injured. Under such circumstances, how could Lin Sun be a match for Xiaohao? Zhao Jingxian could see this, and so could the other strong people present. For a time, they looked at Prince Xiaohao from time to time, as if they wanted to know what he was thinking. The mysterious Saint Attraction has not appeared until now. If the Saint Attraction appears at the end of the second round, Lin Sun will suffer a great loss. Many people murmured in their hearts. They could see that if Prince Xiaohao entered the field at the last moment, Lin Sun had almost no hope of winning. It was very likely that Prince Xiaohao would win and obtain the Saint Attraction. After all, according to the rules of the ultimate battlefield, the end of the second round of the battle represented the end of the ultimate inheritance. It was destined that the Saint Attraction would appear in the second round of the battle. Boom! Lin Sun won once more in the ultimate battlefield. He was already gasping for breath while the color of blood on his body grew darker and darker, and his countenance was terrifyingly pale. It could be seen that he was an arrow at the end of its flight. "Brother Xiaohao, are you still not going to show up?" Lin Sun looked at Xiaohao outside the battlefield. How could he ignore such a peerless figure? Xiaohao was stunned and shook his head. "There are still 2 practitioners who haven't shown up yet. I'd better give the opportunity to them first." Lin Sun joked. "Aren't you worried that the Saint Attraction will come before you show up?" Xiaohao was speechless, and then he said calmly, "That only proves that I have no fate with this kind of opportunity." His words were casual, and his bearing was upright. Lin Sun nodded and said no more. He looked at the 2 practitioners who hadn't shown up yet. P.S. Sorry to let the update be late tonight. Goldfish needs to sort out the plot again. It was certain that the domain of the Absolute Summit would come to an end soon. Chapter 1350. In fact, including Old Toad and Alu, there were more than 3 people who were qualified to challenge Lin Sun at this time. But everyone knew that Old Toad and Alu would never fight at this time, so they had long been ignored. Which one of you will fight first? Lin Sun's voice was a little hoarse. His clothes were mottled with blood, and his face was pale. He was obviously an arrow at the end of its flight, but his tone and expression were still very calm. One of the two was an ancient freak of the Spirit Magpie clan, and the other was the young master of the fiery Golden Vines clan. Both of them were peerless overlords. But at this moment, both of them were very hesitant. Let me. After a while, the overlord of the Spirit Magpie clan took a deep breath and flashed into the battlefield. He was an extremely handsome young man. His eyes were as sharp as an eagle's, and there was a pair of dazzling rainbow-colored wings on his back. The Spirit Magpie, also known as Black Pheasant, was one of the top 3 ancient fierce birds. This young man was called Wang Zheng, and his combat strength was undoubtedly strong. Please. Lin Sun took a deep breath and took out the broken sword. Brother Lin, I'm sorry. A cold light flashed in Wang Zheng's eyes. He rushed up and suddenly spun, and the colorful wings on his back burst out brilliant divine rainbows. Like thousands of spears, they clanged and covered. Buzz! The broken sword made a clear sound, steaming with illusory, snow-white starlight, and the fierce chi was overwhelming. In an instant, the two of them fought fiercely. 15 minutes later, crack! A bloody wound was cut on one of Wang Zheng's wings. He staggered and groaned in pain. Thank you for your mercy, Brother Lin. I admit defeat. Wang Zheng's face was bitter, but his voice was full of sincere admiration. He knew that if Lin Sun had attacked with all his strength, he would have been killed on the spot. Thank you for letting me win. Lin Sun put away the broken sword. But as soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood, and a touch of exhaustion appeared between his eyebrows. His injuries couldn't be considered to be heavy, but the crux was that fighting until now had caused his physical strength to be greatly exhausted, and he was on the verge of exhaustion. But Lin Sun didn't intend to admit defeat. This time, he wanted to fight to his heart's content and fight to the end just for the sake of the saint, because he had promised Zhao Jingxian that he would give it to her. In the distance, Zhao Jingxian wanted to say something but hesitated. In the end, she held back. She knew that it was impossible for Lin to give up at this point. If he tried to dissuade him, he would be disappointed instead. It was precisely because she understood that even though her heart was burning with anxiety and worry, she didn't say anything in the end. There are only 2 people left. It will be over soon. As the old toad muttered to itself, it alu, and the big blackbird were also extremely nervous and moved, because Lin Sun's fighting will was so strong that it was beyond their imagination. Not only them, but all the overmatches present were moved by Lin Sun's fighting will at this moment, and there was an invisible shock spreading in their hearts. A single person was challenged by a group of peerless overlords one after another, and he didn't admit defeat even until now. Who wouldn't be moved by that arrogant and tenacious attitude? I give up. To everyone's surprise, the powerhouse of the Fire Gold Vine race chose to give up after some thought. I only hope that Brother Lin can persist until the end. Lin Sun cupped his hands and didn't say anything more. There was silence in the field, and everyone sighed with emotion. At this point in the battle, even the opponent chose to give up out of respect, which had never happened before. After all, giving up like this not only meant fighting, but also meant missing an opportunity to win the Saint Guide. Brother Xiaohao, please. Lin Sun looked at Xiaohao. For a moment, all eyes in the field also looked at Xiaohao. If there were Yun Qingbai and Lin Sun among the most dazzling, peerless figures in the Upper Nine Realms, then there must be a place for Xiaohao. His strength had long been obvious to all, which could be seen from his proud achievement of dominating the first place on the Tianjiao Golden List in the past few years. Now, he was the only one left in the field, and he was in an absolute peak state. As long as he appeared, there was almost no doubt that he would win. After all, everyone could see that Lin Sun was really in a bad state at the moment. Most importantly, the Saint Guide hadn't appeared so far, which meant that when the last battle ended, the Saint Guide was very likely to be won by Xiaohao. There was silence in the field, and the atmosphere was depressing. Xiaohao was silent for a moment, and suddenly asked, Brother Lin, With all due respect, you must have taken the test of Tianjia Golden List before you came to the ultimate place of inheritance. May I know your ranking? His words caused everyone's heart to skip a beat, and they were extremely curious. Yes, what was Demon Lin's ranking on the Tianjiao Golden List? Lin Sun smiled. I'll tell you after the battle. Even if he was an arrow at the end of its flight, he was not afraid of anything. His attitude of talking and laughing attracted the attention of all the people present. Xiaohao pondered and said, If I fight with you at this time, there is no doubt that I have taken too much advantage of you. If it is spread out, people will think that I have taken advantage of you. If I give up now, it will be hypocritical and pretentious. Everyone looked at each other. From Xiaohao's point of view, the current situation was indeed like this. We don't care so much about the competition. Brother Xiaohao, if you don't fight with me today, you may not have a similar opportunity in the future. Lin Sun smiled. Xiaohao was stunned, and then he laughed at himself. It seems so. Then he took a deep breath, and his eyes became resolute. He said, Well, I will seal 80% of my cultivation and fight with you. As soon as he finished speaking, his figure flashed and flashed into the battlefield, and one could clearly notice that his aura had abruptly reduced greatly. Seeing this, all the heroes in the field couldn't help but be moved, and they looked at Xiaohao with admiration. He was upright, gentle, and had unparalleled power, but he didn't consider himself as such. This kind of demeanor was really admirable. Even Old Toad had to admit that Prince Xiaohao was a very powerful figure, and it was difficult for people to hate him. However, just as the final battle was about to begin, a magnificent rain of light suddenly appeared in the sky above the vault of heaven. Under the surprised gaze of the crowd, the rain of light turned into a majestic, dazzling, godlike figure. Dressed in linen, he was tall, with hundreds of millions of rays of auspicious light behind him. Standing there, he was like the ruler of all ages, overlooking the world. For a moment, the whole audience was shocked, and they all felt as small as ants. In the field, Lin Sun and Xiaohao also stopped what they were doing and looked up at the sky with different expressions. Taishin, Sword Emperor. Lin Sun recognized him at a glance, and he was excited. Sure enough, Prince Xiaohao seemed to think of something, and his eyes narrowed slightly. Great waves wash away the sand to filter out the true gold. Since you have been on the Tianjiao Golden List, you are the top talents in the world. Taishin, Sword Emperor's grand, vast voice resounded between heaven and earth, deafening the deaf, and went straight to people's hearts. Throughout the ages, you have shouldered the great way with iron shoulders. The domain of the absolute peak is just the starting point of your journey. I hope that in the future, you can all climb to the top of the holy path, rise to the top, establish your heart for heaven and earth, establish your life for all living beings, inherit the unique skills for the sages, and establish peace for all ages. Every word resounded like thunder in the hearts of the strong people present. Everyone looked solemn, as if they were listening to the sound of Tao. Boom! In the sky, Taishin Sword Emperor waved his sleeve, and beams of dazzling divine rainbows swept out, rushing toward every strong person present. For a moment, all the strong people present were excited and ecstatic. This is the Saint's Guide. It's true. I feel it. I feel it. How could this be? I can also get it. The crowd was in an uproar, and they couldn't believe it. Each of them had obtained and felt the mysterious power of becoming a saint, which almost made them unable to believe it. Before, they all thought that only the final winner could obtain the Saint's Guide after a series of battles. Who would have thought that such a shocking change would happen at this moment? This is actually true. Old Toad, the big blackbird, and Alu looked at each other, all shaken by this unexpected surprise. Looking at other people in the field, Fairy Ruawu, Yuan Fatian, the young golden-winged rock king, Mi Hongjin, Yimo, and others were also surprised. This was indeed incredible. Even Lin Sun and Emperor Xiaohao were stunned. Who would have thought that the Saint's Guide would appear in such a way at the end? However, Lin Sun's expression was a little strange. The Saint's Guide he obtained was different from the others. He had seen this item before. It was a bronze box about the size of a palm. It was sealed tightly and had once been in the hands of the Taishian Sword Emperor. But now, this thing appeared in his sea of consciousness. Like a heavy bronze flying sword, it exuded a vast and mysterious aura. From beginning to end, Lin Sun was not prepared at all, and this thing just appeared naturally, which made him stunned. This is the experience and understanding of becoming a saint left by a group of practitioners in primitive times. I give it to you here. Because of the different temperaments, the understanding you get is naturally different. In the sky, the voice of Taishian Sword Emperor sounded again, and the whole field became silent again. Everyone's heart was filled with admiration and reverence. They understood that all this had been arranged a long time ago. The previous battles were nothing more than tempering and testing their temperaments. In this way, they could obtain different insights and experience of becoming a saint. Thank you, Senior. In the field, someone bowed and saluted. Thank you, Senior. For a moment, everyone saluted in unison, their expressions solemn, and the world was also filled with a noble spirit. A long time ago, a saint once described the demeanor of the great emperor with the words, "Look up high, drill hard, look ahead, suddenly look behind." Now, everyone looked up at the demeanor of Taishian Sword Emperor, and they all had this feeling. The more they looked up, the higher they felt. The more they studied, the more they felt the way of the emperor was infinite. They wanted to catch up, but they couldn't catch up with him no matter how hard they tried. This was the meaning of these words. It was also the weight of the word Great Emperor. Emperors looked up to the heavens and ruled the universe. They stood before all saints and towered above the heavens. Chapter 13:51. In the sky, Taishian Sword Emperor's silhouette dissipated bit by bit, turning into a rain of light and disappearing. Everyone knew that this was just a will imprint, but they still couldn't help but feel respect and admiration. Perhaps this was the demeanor of an emperor. After a long time, the crowd finally calmed down from their shock and ecstasy. Only then did they realize that this time they had indeed obtained the saint's guide that contained the secret of becoming a saint. Brother Lin, it seems that there is no need to continue this battle. In the ultimate battlefield, Emperor Xiaohao spoke with a strange expression on his face. When everyone heard this, they all looked over and felt the same way. In the second round, Demon God Lin had fought a bloody battle and defeated a group of overlords. But in the end, the saint's guide had indeed appeared, but everyone present had obtained one. In this way, what Demon God Lin had done before seemed meaningless. Of course, deep down, they still admired Lin Sun. It was just that this result was too unexpected. Lin Sun suddenly said, "Brother Xiaohao, if I may be so bold as to ask, did you already know this would happen?" Xiaohao laughed. "Brother Lin's eyes are like torches. I really can't hide it from you." For a time, everyone present was astounded, surprised, and bewildered. Xiaohao actually expected the scene from before. "Brother Lin, you also know that I was sealed in the egg of constellation by my ancestor in the primordial era. At that time, I already knew some secrets about the ultimate domain. I've heard about the saint guidance from my ancestor, Senior Taishian, who is known as the top sword emperor of the Archean era, gathered the experiences of thousands of mighty cultivators to become a saint and left them here so that we can obtain the inheritance with our own abilities today. The test in the ultimate battlefield is secondary. The test of one's temperament is the most important. Therefore, I am not surprised by this result." Xiaohao spoke with fervor and composure, and he told them the whole story. Everyone's expressions changed, and they all sighed. Xiaohao was indeed an emperor's son. His foundation was deep, and the secrets he knew were beyond everyone's imagination. But why didn't Brother Xiaohao remind us? Why did you wait until the truth is out before telling us the truth? Suddenly, someone spoke with dissatisfaction. Many people agreed with his words. Xiaohao's expression turned indifferent. He glanced at the person who spoke and said, "If I were to warn you first, would all of you still be willing to enter the battlefield and fight with all your might? Furthermore, I, Xiaohao, have always done things in an open and above-board manner. However, this does not mean that I need to reveal all the secrets I possess to the public, right? That person was rendered speechless. Indeed, why should Xiaohao remind him? Cultivation is like cultivating the heart. If you blindly think of relying on others to seek fortune, then I'm afraid it would be impossible for all of you to obtain the sage guide so easily this time. Xiaohao's words caused everyone to go silent. No matter what, it was impossible to blame Xiaohao for today's matter. Conversely, it was precisely because he didn't warn them that they were able to go all out and compete for supremacy in the Grand Tao, allowing them to obtain unexpected fortune at this final moment. In fact, they even had to thank Xiaohao for not reminding them. Understanding this, Lin Sun couldn't help sighing with emotion in his heart. Silently, Xiaohao had sold another favor to the heroes present. No matter who it was, they had to acknowledge it. Such wisdom and means were absolutely amazing. Elder brother, you have to be careful. This guy is so shrewd that we can't guess what he's thinking at all. We'd better get in touch with him less in the future. Old Toad transmitted his voice with a trace of fear. Lin Sun listened to it calmly. Brother Lin, you should announce your ranking on the Tianjiao Golden List now, right? Xiaohao asked with a smile. I'm afraid that you will be unhappy after hearing it. Lin Sun said with a smile. Xiaohao was stunned. His eyes narrowed suddenly, and then he shook his head with a wry smile. Alas, if I had known, I wouldn't have asked you. It's so disappointing to ask for a snub. And everyone present also realized that Xiaohao was the first on the Tianjiao Golden List. The answer that could make him ask for a snub was self-evident. First, Devil Lin entered the ultimate place of inheritance as the first on the Tianjiao Golden List before the end of the domain of Absolute Summit. For a moment, all the people present were shocked. The meaning of this first place was too different. In the years since the opening of the Upper Nine Realms, Yun Qingbai had occupied the first place on the Tianjiao Golden List with an unparalleled posture for several years. But in the end, Yun Qingbai was defeated by Lin Sun on the demon-slaying platform, and Xiaohao, the prince, had also occupied the first place on the Tianjiao Golden List in recent years. Until now, no one could shake his position, and his name was well known in the Upper Nine Realms. But now his ranking was broken by Lin Sun in one fell swoop. There was Yun Qingbai before him and Xiaohao after him. One was killed by Lin Sun in a battle, and the other was suppressed by Lin Sun, although he had never fought with Lin Sun. How could such a first place be ordinary? Thinking of Lin Sun's undefeated record in the past, and thinking of the luxurious will battle that had just taken place. For a moment, everyone looked at Lin Sun with unconcealable complexity in their eyes. His clothes were stained with blood, his face was pale, and his hair was disheveled. He looked very weak and tired, but at this time, he was completely different in everyone's eyes. This was an existence that could make any peer tremble and couldn't be ignored. Just like a legend, he had never been defeated since he set foot in the Upper Nine Realms. Today, Brother Lin is the leader in the absolute domain. In the silence, Ruo Wu Fairy opened her mouth. Her cold voice was earth-shattering, which made all the people present restless. This sentence was too heavy. It was no less than admitting that Lin Sun was the first in the absolute domain. If it were others, they couldn't bear such a reputation at all, because if they couldn't bear it, they would be condemned by thousands of people and scolded for overestimating themselves. But this reputation was crowned on Lin Sun's head. It made people speechless, unable to refute, and unable to dispute it. Yuan Fatian, Little Golden-Winged Rock, Yi Moha, Mi Hongzhen, Wang Xuanyu, Ji Xingyao, and other peerless overlords didn't refute. Silence itself was a kind of recognition. Even if they might be dissatisfied in their hearts, they had to admit it. Xiaohao, on the other hand, had a rare loss of composure. His usually tranquil expression revealed a complicated expression at this moment. He looked at Lin Sun and didn't say much. But who knew what he was thinking in his heart? Mr. Alwu, you flatter me. Lin Sun cupped his hands in obeisance, and his heart was calm. The first in the absolute domain, his path had never been limited to this. When he learned about the power of the sages, the bloody war between the 9 regions, and the mysterious starry sky ancient path outside, the ancient desolation domain, which made emperors explore one after another, Lin Sun's eyes had already changed. He knew that there was still a long way to go. In the past, he seemed to be the enemy of the whole world. If one day he could be invincible in the whole world, maybe it would be a time to be proud. As soon as his voice fell, Lin Sun walked out of the ultimate battlefield. The crowd was silent and looked at each other, which was a kind of recognition and respect for Lin Sun's strength. "Brother Lin," suddenly Xiao Hao spoke. Lin Sun stopped and turned his head. "What's the matter?" Xiao Hao said with a smile. "I hope that when the battle of the 9 regions comes, I can compete with you again." The word "again" proved that Xiao Hao still cared about being overtaken by Lin Sun. "If there is a chance, I will accompany you." Lin Sun smiled and turned to leave the battlefield. Seeing Lin Sun coming over, Old Toad, Alu, and the big blackbird were all extremely excited. After 10 years in the absolute domain, Lin Sun had become the recognized first in the absolute domain from a reincarnation developing rel practitioner. Moreover, it was well-deserved and no one doubted it. How could they not be excited and happy? "Big brother." Old Toad rushed forward excitedly and wanted to give Lin Sun a big hug, but was stopped by Alu, who scolded, "This is not the time for you to be attentive." Old Toad was stunned and looked at Zhao Jingxian. At this time, Zhao Jingxuan's picturesque face was full of a bright smile, and her eyes were like crescent moons. No one knew better than her how difficult it was for Lin Sun to achieve what he had today since he started cultivating in the lower world. It was because of this understanding that she was even more excited and happy. When she saw Lin Sun's blood-stained clothes getting closer and closer, Zhao Jingxian couldn't help rushing forward and hugging Lin Sun. Her clear eyes were filled with tears, and the rims of her eyes were red. There was nothing. She just hugged him tightly. Old Toad, Alu, and the big blackbird all grinned. Lin Sun was stunned at first, feeling the soft fragrance and warm jade in his arms. All the emotions in his heart finally turned into a smile on his lips. On this day, the battle for the ultimate land of inheritance ended, and the heroes left one after another. On the same day, the news about Saint Guide and Lin Sun becoming the first in the absolute domain spread like a hurricane throughout the upper 9 realms. Uproar, shock, surprise, and disbelief were like a pot exploding in different areas and places. The first on the Tianjiao Golden List. The first in the absolute domain. Both titles were owned by Fiend Celestial Lin alone. This was something no one had expected. At the same time, voices of doubt also appeared, but soon disappeared. Because all the peerless overlords who participated in the battle for the intermediate land of inheritance had already acknowledged that there was no room for these doubts to exist at all. This was what it meant to be true, to be true. As for Prince Xiao Hao, a peerless overlord who had been the focus of countless people's attention, he was a little dimmer under Lin Sun's prestige. Of course, this was just a comparison of reputation. The first would always receive more attention than the second. There could only be one person who stood at the pinnacle of the world and was the only one who could do so. None of this had anything to do with Lin Sun. After returning to Flying Star Mountain with Zhao, Jingxian, and Old Toad, he began to seize the time to heal his wounds. Because in less than a month, the absolute domain would come to an end. P.S. The plot of the absolute domain is almost finished. Demon God Lin is going to return to the ancient desolation domain. A new hegemony and journey is about to begin. In addition, there will be more updates tomorrow. Finally, about the subscriptions. They weren't miserable, but they didn't have enough momentum, and the increase was so slow that it was almost invisible. Goldfish wasn't complaining about being poor. She had been writing Tianjiao for more than a year now, but she had never asked for subscriptions like this time. She was really forced to do so. The subscriptions were too bad. What she lacked was not only money to support her family, but also a mental blow to her writing. Everyone had their own goals. Of course, she hoped that the results of her writing would get better and better. Friends who read pirated copies of Goldfish's book could also come and support her after seeing her heartfelt voice. She thanked her friends. Chapter 1352. 3 days later, Lin Sun woke up from meditation, and his exhaustion and injuries had been swept away. The battle in the ultimate place of inheritance only made him consume a lot of energy, but he was not seriously injured. The seventh tribulation of longevity realm. Opening his eyes, Lin Sun felt a strong omen in his heart. It wouldn't be long before he would usher in the eighth tribulation of longevity. This tribulation was called fate, and the power involved the most essential mystery of the cultivator. Some people could pass it easily. Some people would die here because the power of fate was too terrifying. Every single cultivator suffered a different energy of tribulation, and it was extremely obscure and terrifying. Fate is the destiny that is predestined at birth. Since ancient times, all living beings in the world have been floating between life and death. They are as small as ants and as big as gods. All of them have their own fate. Fate is regarded as predetermined at birth. For example, if ordinary people don't cultivate, their lifespan will be limited to 100 years. They will experience the pain of birth, old age, illness, and death all their lives, and they can't transcend it. But for us cultivators, fate is like a shackle. If we want to live as long as heaven and earth, we should break this shackle and get rid of the burden of fate. However, the secret of fate is like a taboo, and its tribulations are also unspeakable. If we want to break it, it depends on each person. This tribulation is not difficult, but dangerous. Lin Sun pondered. Since he started cultivating, his knowledge and experience had long been different. His understanding of himself, heaven and earth, and Tao was also incomparable to before. It was because he knew the unfathomable power of fate that Lin Sun knew that the eighth tribulation of longevity was more dangerous than the karma disaster and the karma disaster. I was born in the heart-cleansing peak of the forbidden city of the empire. If I want to break the tribulation of fate, I should start from the source. While thinking, Lin Sun got up and walked out of the cave residence. The sky was bright and clear, as if it had been washed. Old Toad, Big Blackbird, and Alu were drinking beside a waterfall and flowing spring. They were chatting noisily and happily. On the other side, Zhao Jingxian stood at the side of the stream, holding a weasel brush in her hand as she practiced calligraphy on the table. Her jet black hair was coiled into a bun, revealing her snow-white neck. Her waist was curved in a graceful arc as she bent over the desk to read. Her side profile was delicate and clear. Her eyes were focused, and her demeanor was quiet and gentle. The hem of her light purple dress fluttered in the wind. The surroundings were lush with flowers and trees, creating a picturesque scene. She stood in the painting, but she was even more beautiful than the painting. Lin Sun stepped forward. At this time, Zhao Jingxian finished writing and raised her body. When he noticed Lin's approach, he tore the white paper into pieces and crumpled it into a ball, as if he had a guilty conscience. "Why are you acting like a thief?" Lin touched his nose and became more and more curious. What was Zhao Jingxian writing just now? Zhao Jingxian was wearing a light purple dress, which accentuated her graceful and slender figure. Her face was like a beautiful jade, her eyes were like a clear spring, and her nose was like a carved jade. However, with a trace of shame and annoyance on her pretty face, she stared at Lin Sun and said, "You are the thief who sneaked in without telling me." The beauty in front of him had bright eyes and white teeth. Lin Sun couldn't help laughing. Standing next to her was like standing next to a crepe myrtle flower blooming in the spring breeze in March. She was picturesque, and the scenery also became a foil, which made people feel relaxed and happy. In the end, Lin Sun didn't ask what Zhao Jingxian was writing just now. However, after many things, Lin Sun and Zhao Jingxian both knew that the relationship between them was no longer as simple as before. It was also a long time later when Zhao Jingxian talked to Lin Sun about today's event. She said a line of words written on the white paper, "May I be like the Star King and the moon." Every night, the flowing light was bright. 10 days later, the absolute summit domain will end and disappear from the world. On the same day, The news spread throughout the Upper Nine regions and was known by the strong people in different areas. It's time to leave. Many people sighed with emotion. Over the years, in order to rise, in order to compete for opportunities, how many bloody fights had taken place? How many talented people had been killed or injured? Now, it was finally time to leave, which made people feel sad and reluctant. Everyone knew that it was impossible to have a chance to enter the absolute summit domain in the future. Hurry up, collect all the royal medicines and divine medicines planted on the mountain, and take all the excavated divine materials and spiritual materials away. On the famous mountains and blessed lands, the strong people of the major forces hurriedly started to make preparations before leaving. Since they were about to leave, no one would leave behind the treasures they had collected. Send an order to those who are exploring opportunities to return quickly. The absolute summit domain will disappear in 10 days. Don't be trapped in it. Alas, I really don't want to leave. In just a few years, our cultivation has risen steadily, and we have today's combat power. If we can cultivate here for more time, it won't be a problem to become a sage. Humph! After the absolute summit domain ends, there will be a great battle in the world. The outside world is the stage where we can show our skills and shake the world. On this day, all kinds of voices sounded. Some people were reluctant to leave, some people were melancholy, and some people were complacent and full of pride. Haha! In the outside world, Lin Sun, the first person in the absolute summit domain, won't have such a great deterrent. On this day, some people also sneered. He has killed so many peerless figures. How can the sects behind these peerless figures spare him? Wait and see. When the outside world knows what happened in this absolute summit domain, Lin Sun is destined to bear the anger of countless sects. Flying Star Mountain. Lin Sun and others were also making preparations before leaving. Big Brother, according to past experience, after leaving the absolute summit domain this time, we will appear in the place of guidance along the original road. Old Toad said quickly, we must be careful. In the absolute summit domain, there are no saints. But in the ancient desolation domain, with our current combat power, we are not able to compete with the saints. Lin Sun nodded. He naturally understood this. Old Toad reminded again, in the past 10 years, countless strong people have died in your hands. If the sects behind them know this news, they will definitely hate you and regard you as an enemy. Lin Sun said with a smile, Old Toad, we have experienced this kind of thing a lot, haven't we? Of course. When they returned from the land of Ultimate, Lin Sun and others were besieged by a group of kings. At that time, Lin Sun and others were still weak in cultivation. Thanks to the help of the cyan-clothed old ape beside Yuan Fatian, they were able to escape safely. After participating in the Junior Tycoon list, Lin Sun also faced this kind of danger. He was blocked by a group of old monsters of King Realm in the Star Chest Sea. And now, after leaving the absolute summit domain, the situation they faced was no different from before. The only difference might be that Lin Sun didn't have much ability to fight back before. But now it was completely different. The old monsters of King Realm, whom he was afraid of in the past, were no longer a threat. If they dared to provoke him again, it was absolutely no different from seeking death. The only thing that could threaten Lin Sun might be the strong of the Saint Realm. However, how could Lin Sun be afraid? The trump card in his hand was enough to make him not afraid of the Saints. Big Brother, what's your plan after returning to the ancient desolation domain? Alu suddenly asked. Lin Sun nodded. He had made up his mind. Although Yun Qingbai was dead, the accomplice of the Lin family's murder was still alive. It was time to solve these things. If everything went well, Lin Sun would consider returning to the mortal world. Alu, do you have other plans? Old Toad suddenly asked. Well, the old bastard who raised me said that he wanted me to go home after returning from the absolute summit domain. He said that he wanted to tell me my life experience. Alu nodded. Lin Sun and others had learned before that Alu was brought up by his master. As for his life experience, even he himself didn't know. Do you want us to go with you? Lin Sun asked. No, that old bastard definitely won't agree. Alu shook his head. What about you? Lin Sun looked at the big blackbird. The big blackbird was startled. Then, with a desolate and helpless expression, it sighed and said, even though I want nothing more than to flatten the great earth scripture temple, I have to make another trip there. Back then, holy monk Du Ji left behind some karma. I have to go and resolve it. The great earth temple. Lin Sun frowned at the mention of this sacred place, and his heart was full of killing intent. From the 18 Ksiddhartha Bodhisattva to Gu Fozi, they all regarded him as a heretic and wanted to kill him. And according to the big blackbird, unless Lin Sun died, the great earth temple would never let him go. It was like fighting to the death. Lin Sun had made up his mind a long time ago that sooner or later he must destroy the great earth temple. In fact, you should be more concerned about Miss Xiao. On the way back, she has to be separated from us for a while, otherwise she can't get out of the absolute summit domain. Old Toad reminded him. This was true. At the beginning, they and Zhao Jingxian entered the absolute summit domain from different places, so the return route must be the same. Even so, Zhao Jingxian was still embarrassed by Old Toad's words. She couldn't help but kick him and said, it's not a separation of life and death. Do you need to be a good person? Lin Sun also kicked him and said with a smile, you talk too much. You don't even want your brother after you have a woman? Is this the legendary forgetting friends at the sight of love? Old Toad shouted and ran away, making Alu and others laugh. The immortal burning realm. In the immortal burning city, Kai Kai carefully held the earthen jar and walked on the bustling street. She was a little reluctant to leave. She originally wanted to gather some fiery glow spirit dew. Yet in the end, she heard that the curtains to the apex region were about to fall. Now, all the practitioners in the immortal burning realm were busy packing up their things and preparing to leave. Some shops in the city also closed their doors and began to count and collect goods to prepare for leaving the absolute summit domain. Kai Kai heard that now not only in the immortal burning realm, but also in other places of the 3,000 worlds, such scenes were happening. 10 years had passed by so quickly. Kai Kai became more and more reluctant to leave as she thought about it. Suddenly, she stopped, and a trace of firmness appeared in her star-like eyes. She turned around and flew in the direction of the city gate. Before she left, she wanted to collect the fiery, glow spirit dew again. She still remembered that there was an unusually gorgeous fiery glow over a canyon thousands of miles away from the immortal burning city, like a divine fire burning in the sky. Extremely beautiful. Miss, I heard that you have a lot of fiery dew in your hands. However, not long after Kai Kai left the city, a black-robed young man suddenly appeared in front of her and asked, P.S. More updates tonight. Before 10 p.m., friends, please subscribe. Subscription means to come online to read books with Zone Hong coins. Chapter 1353. Yes, young master. Kai Kai was startled, and then she spoke cautiously. Although Kai Kai's cultivation had not improved much over the years, her experience was extremely rich. After all, to be able to survive until now in the bloody and cruel zone of extinction was not something that could be achieved by luck. She recognized at a glance that the young man in black was a king, and his cultivation was extremely high. He was at least at the longevity 5th retribution realm. In the current burning celestial realm, the longevity 5th retribution realm could be said to be the top overlord, and no one dared to provoke them. How much do you have? The young man in black looked at Kai Kai with interest. About 50 kilograms. Kai Kai estimated and answered seriously. These are 10 king herbs. I believe it's enough to buy all of your fiery spirit dew. The young man in black took out a storage bag and handed it to Kai Kai. As he spoke, he stared at the girl in front of him. She had a clean, beautiful, and pure face, and the more he looked at her, the more he liked her. In particular, the girl in front of him had an aura of elegance all over her body. She was fresh and unique and a feast for the eyes. The young man in black boasted that he had seen many beautiful women over the years, but compared to the girl in front of him, they seemed a little tacky. Thank you, young master. Kai Kai nodded. She took out the earthen jar that she was holding and handed it over to him. The young man in black took it, but he did not look at it. He stared at the girl in front of him and said, I still lack a personal maid. If you're willing, you can follow me in the future. His voice was calm, but it carried a hint of reservation and conceit. It was as if it was a great honor to be able to follow him and cultivate. Kai was stunned. Then she shook her head and said, No, thank you, young master. Only then did she understand that he did not want to buy the fiery spirit due, but to take her as a maid. The young man in black was stunned. With his identity and his current cultivation, there would be a lot of women throwing themselves at him with a wave of his hand. But now he was rejected. Moreover, the other party was just a girl at the reincarnation development realm. Next to the young man in black was a burly man. After hearing the words, his face was full of displeasure and hostility, and he looked coldly at the ungrateful girl in front of him. The young man in black waved his hand and signaled his squire not to scare the beauty in front of him. He smiled and said, How about this? You can think about it. I don't want to make things difficult for you, but you have already taken 10 king herbs from me. If you reject me like this, I'm afraid it's not good, right? He was very disdainful. 50 kilograms of fiery spirit dew was at most 8 king herbs. He believed that the girl in front of him. Young master, I will give it back. I won't sell it. Master, Kai said seriously. Kai, I'm master. I and fiery. The young man he, stunned. He, master, Ali young, The burly squire couldn't help but say coldly. It was lucky for a girl who hadn't even entered the king's realm to be favored by the young master, but she didn't know what was good for her. Kai's pretty face turned pale. She bit her lips and became nervous. She was a descendant of the Cloud Weaver tribe, which stood aloof from worldly affairs. They were kind-hearted and often regarded as timid. Kai clenched her teeth and said, Master Lin and I are friends. If he knows that you treat me like this, he will be very angry. Hearing such a soft sentence, the young man in black and his squire couldn't help but laugh. Obviously, this girl didn't even know how to threaten people. She seemed very simple. Tell me, where does Master Lin come from? Why haven't I heard of him in the immortal burning world? The young man in black asked with a hint of ridicule. Lin's son, child Lin. Kai said seriously. Lin's son. As soon as the name came out, the young man in black and his squire were shocked, and their faces changed slightly. Who didn't know Demon Lin? In the first year he entered the immortal burning world, he killed so much that blood flowed like a river in the city. The territories of the Golden Crow bloodline, the Bee Spirit Mountain, the Xuandu Dao sect, and the Sea Soul tribe were all uprooted by him, shocking the entire immortal burning world. Later on, Demon Lin entered the upper 9 realms with the cultivation of a king. The young man in black and his squire naturally knew how terrifying Lin's son was. Although there had been no news of Lin's son in the immortal burning world for the past 9 years, his name was still circulating in the immortal burning world. In these years, many people speculated that Demon Lin must have met with disaster when he went to the upper 9 realms because he had too many enemies. It was impossible for him to be a match for those ancient powerhouses. Some people didn't think so. But no matter what, Lin's son was indeed a celebrity in the immortal burning world. What a joke. Lin's son is indeed a top figure. But how could such a figure be friends with a little girl like you? The burly squire had a look of disdain on his face. He thought that Kai was using a tiger's skin to scare them. It was a very childish trick. At this moment, the young man in black also came back to his senses. He said with a slightly cold expression, Let's not talk about this. 9 years have passed. Lin's son probably didn't come back from the upper 9 realms alive. But you're using this to threaten me. Miss, do you think I dare not use force on you? His voice carried a hint of coldness. Kai's hands and feet were cold. She didn't expect to encounter such an unexpected disaster when she was about to leave the absolute summit domain. The attitude of the young man in black and his squire made her feel a sense of helplessness and despair. How could she escape safely with her strength? Boom! At this moment, a strange roar suddenly sounded in the sky above the tower of the immortal burning world. Then, a void tunnel appeared in the sky. For a moment, All the cultivators inside and outside the immortal burning city stopped what they were doing and looked at the void tunnel. The powerhouses who went to the upper 9 realms are coming back. Someone shouted excitedly. After 9 years, those powerhouses who were qualified to achieve the Jew King realm would return to the immortal burning world. How strong would their cultivation be in these 9 years? In these 9 years, how many powerhouses were buried in the upper 9 realms and could never return? Everyone was paying close attention to it. Even the young man in black and his squire were shocked by this scene. "Miss, you don't think that Lin's son still has hope to come back, do you?" The young man in black noticed that Kai, who was beside him, also revealed a touch of hope at this moment, and her crystal-clear eyes were shining like gems. This made him a little displeased. Kai pursed her lips and remained silent. Boom! A bright figure was the first to walk out of the void tunnel. This was a silver-robed man with a single horn on his head. His whole body was flowing with Taoist light, and he was like a god descending to the world. As soon as he appeared, the invisible power emitted from his body seemed to cover the sky and the earth, and it spread in all directions, causing many powerhouses to hold their breath and change their expressions in horror. Even the young man in black couldn't help but change his expression abruptly. So strong. Is this the power that belongs to the Extinction King realm? The young man in black couldn't help but clench his fists. Although he had the cultivation of the 5th retribution of the longevity realm, he had not set foot in the Extinction King realm. This had always troubled him, and he had been disappointed, and he had also felt pain and resentment because of this. It's the ancient freak of the Silver Rhino clan. I didn't expect him to have such terrifying power, someone said with a trembling voice. To all the powerhouses in the burning celestial realm, the Extinction King realm was like a celestial being, and they were in a different world. Unexpectedly, after the powerhouse of the Silver Rhino clan appeared, he didn't leave, but stood to the side. Buzz! The void tunnel glowed, and another figure walked out of it. This was a graceful and slender woman bathed in light golden mist. Her aura was equally terrifying. Oh my God, isn't that the saintess of the Golden Monkey clan? Look at her aura. It's simply too terrifying. There was another uproar in the field. The young man in black's expression became more and more gloomy, and his heart was bitter and unwilling. All those years ago, he was just a step away from entering the upper 9 realms, and he missed the chance to become an Extinction King realm expert. How could he be willing to accept this? In the following period of time, one Extinction King realm expert after another walked out of the void tunnel. There were men and women, and all of them were powerful and elegant. For a time, the entire burning celestial city was in an uproar, and countless exclamations of surprise resounded, and it lasted for a long time. However, no matter who those Extinction King realm experts were, all of them moved to the side as if they were waiting for someone. This caused them to feel even more anticipation. Exactly which peak figure possesses such might to actually be able to make so many Extinction King realm experts wait like this? It's been so long, but the young Master Lin you've been waiting for hasn't appeared. Do you think there's a chance he's still alive? The young man in black glanced at Kai. Kai's expression was gloomy, but she still insisted, "Young Master Lin is a good person, and a good person can definitely come back alive." A good person? The young man in black sneered. When did he, Demon God Lin, become a good person? It's the biggest joke in the world. Young Master, it's the young Master. Suddenly, the burly retainer next to him said excitedly. The young man in black looked up and saw a figure walking out from the void tunnel. He had silver hair and a heroic appearance, and there was a red mole between his eyebrows. It was the young Master. The young Master has also stepped into the peak, and he came back alive. The young man in black was also excited and overjoyed. However, what shocked him and the retainer was that the young Master, who was like a god in their hearts, was also standing to the side like the other Extinction King realm experts. The young man in black and the retainer looked at each other. Even the young Master has to wait in such a low-profile manner? Who was the person who made so many Extinction King realm experts wait even before he appeared? P.S. Thank you for your gifts, support, and messages. There are many names, so I won't list them one by one. This is the second update, and the goldfish will continue to update the third update. Chapter 1354. Inside and outside the immortal burning city, a group of practitioners also noticed that something was wrong. Those king of Hell realm were so dazzling and powerful, but now they all seemed to have a tacit understanding, waiting on the side of the void tunnel. No one left. Who on earth were they waiting for? Give up. Lin Sun has too many enemies. He must be dead. The young man in black noticed that Kai Kai was still staring at the void tunnel. She didn't seem to give up her hope. This made him a little unhappy. Did this girl really think that a dead man could threaten him? Miss, my master's right. Lin Sun is not popular. He has too many enemies. How can he make so many king of Hell realm wait together? The burly retainer sneered. Kai Kai's face became paler and paler. She said seriously, a good man will be rewarded. Child Lin will be fine. Another good man. The young man in black snorted. In my opinion, you and Lin Sun are not friends, are you? Kai Kai was stunned. After a moment of silence, she said, Child Lin may not think so, but as long as I treat him as a friend, it's fine. The young man in black and his servant both sneered. This girl was so innocent that it made people laugh. The young man in black waved his hand, signaling the burly retainer beside him to take action. He had lost his patience and wanted to capture Kai Kai first. If he could take such a fresh, refined, and pure girl as his personal maid and train her little by little, it would be a lot of fun. The retainer immediately showed a knowing smile, but looked particularly vicious and awe-inspiring. In his opinion, his master should have done this long ago. She was just a girl of reincarnation developing realm. Why talk so much nonsense with her? But just as he was about to take action, Kai Kai suddenly cheered and said excitedly, Child Lin is back. The retainer's expression froze. At the same time, the young man in black also changed his expression and looked over. They saw a group of figures walking out of the void tunnel one after another. And the one walking at the back was Lin Sun. He was still the same as 9 years ago, wearing a moon-white robe. His figure was tall and straight, and there was no aggressive aura around him. Instead, there was a kind of unworldly aura. Among the king of Hell realm, his aura was even inconspicuous. But when he appeared, all the peak monarchs who were waiting near the void tunnel stopped what they were doing. Then, they all bowed slightly and paid their respects. In an instant, countless experts inside and outside the city of burning celestial city widened their eyes in shock. The originally noisy atmosphere also became strangely silent. Not a single sound could be heard. Lin Sun, he was still alive. This was simply like a miracle, and it was too inconceivable. In the immortal burning world, who didn't know that 9 years ago, Lin Sun alone set off a storm of blood in the immortal burning city and slaughtered countless powerful people? However, it was also because of this that he had offended countless ruthless people. In the past 9 years, all the discussions about Lin Sun boiled down to one question. Who would kill Lin Sun? It was not about whether Lin Sun was still alive, because subconsciously they all thought that after he entered the Upper Nine realm, he was doomed to suffer. After all, he had too many enemies. But who would have thought that he would return alive today? If it was said that this kind of shock was enough to stun anyone. But when they saw that it was still Lin Sun whom they had been waiting for, the unprecedented impact was enough to make anyone dumbfounded. Previously, the top figures came out one after another, shocking the immortal burning world and causing a great sensation. How eye-catching was that? But Lin Sun's appearance was like a big sun, overshadowing all the light present. The stars around the moon were just like that. The young man in black and his servant were also stunned. Their eyes were wide open, and their expressions were dull, as if they had seen a ridiculous and bizarre scene happen in front of them. As I said, Child Lin is such a good person. How could he not come back? Kai Kai was very excited at the moment. All the haze on her pure and pretty little face was swept away, and her originally dim eyes were as bright as stars, shining brightly. Her voice was filled with sincere joy. because Lin Sun had given her the warmest help and care in the past. The young man in black's expression kept changing. After a while, he suddenly sneered. Unfortunately, you regard him as a friend, but he will not regard you, a nobody in the reincarnation developing realm, as a friend. Speaking of this, he seemed to vent his inner resentment. He gritted his teeth and said, Miss, it's not good to flatter yourself. It doesn't matter. Anyway, I'm very happy to know that Child Lin is safe and sound. Kai Kai smiled. Her character might be very simple, but she could also distinguish who was good and who was bad. After 9 years, she was very happy to see Lin Sun again, even if it was just from a distance. This was Kai Kai. Maybe her cultivation was low, maybe she had no identity, but she had her own temperament and cognition. The young man in black felt a little dazzling. The smile on Kai Kai's face was too bright, which made him feel an unspeakable anger in his heart. What are you waiting for? Catch her for me, he shouted, a little flustered and exasperated. The burly retainer was stunned and hurriedly accepted the order. With a fierce look in his eyes, he walked towards Kai Kai. A girl in the reincarnation developing realm simply and firmly regarded Lin Sun as a friend. Lin Sun might have forgotten who she was, which was ridiculous in itself. But at the moment when the burly retainer took action, he only felt a gaze sweeping over him. Suddenly, his body seemed to be frozen and his scalp was numb. A feeling of fear and uneasiness spread all over his body like a torrent, making him almost suffocate. However, all of this was merely swept by a single gaze. What are you waiting for? Seeing the burly retainer standing there, the young man in black was so angry that his face turned green. He raised his hand and was about to slap him. At this moment, a gaze fell on him. At this instant, it was like a shapeless sharp sword was pressed against his throat, causing the black-clothed young man's entire body to stiffen. His hands stopped moving, his face turned ghastly pale, and sweat poured down from his forehead. Child Lin. At this moment, Kai Kai exclaimed. She didn't know when the familiar figure of Lin Sun had come. In the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of her. Like a dream, it came so inconceivably that Kai Kai couldn't help being in a trance. What's wrong? Lin Sun asked, glancing at the young man in black and his servant. Just now, he had acutely sensed the commotion here, and he had also sensed the murderous intent coming from the master and servant. Therefore, he didn't hesitate to take action. How could he forget this little girl, Kai Kai? Kai Kai's voice was clear, and she quickly told him what had happened before. During this entire process, both the black-clothed young man and his servant seemed as if they were grieving the death of their parents, and they were excessively terrified and almost collapsed. How could they have imagined that a girl in the reincarnation developing realm would really have a relationship with Demon Godlin? The difference was too big. It was like an ant saying that she was a friend of a dragon in the sky. It would be new. And before that, they also confirmed that Kai Kai had said that she only regarded Lin Sun as a friend on her own wishful thinking. Because of this, they dared to regard Kai Kai as prey without fear. But who would have thought? An ant becoming friends with a dragon was actually happening right before their eyes. At this moment, the young man in black and his servant felt like 10,000 wild horses were galloping through their hearts. They were completely dumbfounded. I see. Lin Sun's eyes suddenly turned cold when he learned all this. With his current power, just a trace of his aura was enough to make experts of the same generation feel oppressed. Not to mention 2 kings who hadn't even entered the invincible realm. It's a misunderstanding. It's all a misunderstanding. The young man in black was about to suffocate. He couldn't take it anymore and explained with a sad face. The burly retainer was so shocked that he lost his composure. His knees gave way and he collapsed to the ground. What's going on? Old Toad, Alu, and the big blackbird also rushed over and watched with interest. At the same time, a group of supreme kings who had returned to the realm of immortals with Lin Sun were alarmed by the commotion and rushed over. For a moment, supreme kings gathered here, changing the color of the sky and earth. However, to the black-clothed young man, this scene was simply too extravagant, and it caused him to feel extremely pressured. His heart was on the verge of collapse. "Young master, please explain to Taoism Pure Lin's son." I didn't mean it." The black-clothed young man looked to the side, as if he was asking for help. He was like a drowning person who had grabbed onto a straw, and his face was full of pleading. A figure stood there. He had a head of silver hair and a heroic appearance. There was a red mole between his brows. He was undoubtedly an exceptional figure. Lin Sun didn't know him, but he looked familiar. But it didn't matter to him whether he knew him or not. The silver-haired young man took a deep breath and cupped his hands. "Brother Lin, this man is a direct descendant of my clan. Could you forgive him? I'm willing to compensate him with 10 times the price." Seeing this, the young man in black's heart rolled again. How could the young master, who was so proud of the world, bow his head in front of Lin's son? Only then did he suddenly realize that Lin's son in front of him was not the same as 9 years ago. Lin's son pointed to Kai Kai next to him and said calmly, "She is my friend. Do you think this matter can be settled with just some compensation?" The other supreme figures all looked strange and kept silent. Who didn't know how miserable the fate of offending Lin Sun's friends would be? White Dragon Court and Ming Child were directly killed by Lin Sun, who arrived in time, just because they wanted to seize the fortune of a loose emperor's tomb. "Brother Lin," the silver-haired young man smiled bitterly. He couldn't wait to kill the young man in black. This stupid pig should offend the friend of Demon God Lin. Even if he wanted to die, he shouldn't do it like this. However, before he could explain, he was interrupted by Lin's son. "Don't say more. I just want a satisfactory explanation. If you can't make a decision, I'll do it." He would never forget that all those years ago, when he'd fallen into a state of emptiness and had completely forgotten himself because he'd comprehended the Tao and wandered through the immortal world like a madman, it was precisely Kai Kai who was by his side and didn't mind the dirt on his body as she carefully washed his face. Such a small action made Lin's son feel a real kindness. Now, how could he be indifferent when he saw Kai Kai being bullied? The young man in black seemed to realize that something was wrong. He suddenly knelt down and kowtowed, begging for mercy. "Young master, I really know I was wrong. I dare not do it again." The silver-haired young man sighed in his heart and slapped. The voice of begging for mercy stopped abruptly. P.S. The third update is here. Friends, the subscription results have begun to improve, but it's not enough. As long as more friends who are still watching pirated versions subscribe to support us, we will continue to add updates tomorrow. Chapter 1355. The young man in black was scared and his voice stopped abruptly. In front of him, the burly retainer, who was sitting on the ground, was killed by a palm and lay on the ground completely. His eyes were wide open before his death. He didn't seem to expect that he would be the first to die in the end. Was this a scapegoat? As a retainer, you don't dissuade your master from doing evil, but help the wicked. You deserve to die, the silver-haired man said coldly. However, all the people nearby could see that the silver-haired man wanted to save the young man in black with the life of a retainer. Lin Sun also saw it, but he just looked at him without saying a word. Such a look was a kind of attitude. The silver-haired man felt bitter in his heart. He realized that killing a retainer was not enough to satisfy the demon in front of him. He took a deep breath and looked at the young man in black with cold eyes. "Child Lin, can you stop him from killing?" But at this moment, Kai Kai seemed to have summoned up her courage and said in a low voice. Hearing this, the silver-haired man immediately showed his gratitude and looked at Kai Kai kindly. He knew that whoever started the trouble should untie it. Whether the young man in black could survive or not depended on whether this girl could change Lin Sun's attitude. "Kai Kai, do you know what would have happened to you if I hadn't come in time?" Lin Sun looked at the girl in front of him with a gentle look. "I know." Kai Kai nodded and then murmured with some embarrassment. "But I don't want you to offend them because of me. It's just a trifle. It's not worth it." Everyone was speechless. Demon Lin was afraid of offending others. It was like a joke, but in this way, it seemed that the girl's intention was extremely rare and valuable. "Well, I'll listen to you." Lin Sun also smiled. Kai Kai was still the same as 9 years ago. Kind, simple, and pure, like a ray of sunshine, giving people the simplest warmth. Kai was a little reserved. Well, you don't blame me for meddling, do you? As you said, it's just a trifle. As long as you think it's right, try to stick to this idea. Lin's son smiled. Thank you, Lord Lin. On the ground, the black-clothed youth was so excited that he couldn't speak coherently. Idiot, you should thank this young lady instead. If it wasn't for her, I would wish for nothing more than to kill you with a single palm strike. The silver-haired man fiercely kicked him, as if he was exasperated at his failure to meet his expectations. Just like that, a small grudge came to an end. The black-robed youth was lucky enough to keep his life, and was taken away by the silver-haired man. The other heroes also left one after another. Perhaps the most absurd thing was that from the beginning to the end, Lin Sun didn't know who the black-clothed youth was, nor did he know the silver-haired man. I don't even know their names. But when Lin Sun appeared, the conflict was solved in the most smooth way without the need for him to do it himself. This was power, subduing the enemy without a fight. Kai, it's been so many years. Why haven't you entered the King realm? Lin Sun was puzzled. Outside the city of immortal burning, Lin Sun and the others found a mountain at random and rested for a while. In about 3 days, the City of Guidance's power would appear in the Apex domain. At that time, all the practitioners in the 3,000 worlds could return to the ancient Desolation domain. Kai was a little embarrassed and said, "When I was cultivating, my father told me that cultivation is to do what I like the most. I only like to collect rosy glow dew, and that's it. That's right." Lin Sun exclaimed in admiration. Cultivation came from one's heart. Every practitioner's pursuit was different. Some people sought the extreme of sword Tao, such as Yun Qingbai. Some people sought to be a sage, such as Alu. Some people just wanted to see all the phenomena in the world and see the true meaning of Tao, such as Old Toad. There were also people who sought fame, benefits, techniques, and Taos. They wanted to be immortal for eternity, to be free and unfettered, and so on. What Kai sought was love. She regarded cultivation as her heart, and she liked to collect rosy glow dew, which was her cultivation. Although her cultivation didn't improve very fast, it was also cultivation. Do you have a goal? Lin Sun asked. Yes. Kai's starlight, clear eyes suddenly brightened, and her delicate and clear face was full of longing. She said seriously, I hope that one day I can collect the clouds in the world, refine the most beautiful silk thread in the world, and then weave a dress with my own hands as my wedding dress. I also want to collect 10,000 different kinds of rosy glow dew and make them into wine. When I get married, I will invite my friends who will attend my wedding banquet to taste it together. Speaking of her dreams, Kai's entire person glowed with an indescribable radiance. That clear and melodious voice of hers was like the sounds of nature drifting through the air. The girl stood in the clouds on the top of the mountain with her hands behind her back, like the most gorgeous ray of light. Lin Sun was stunned for a while, and then praised sincerely, "This is the most beautiful goal of Tao I have ever seen." Kai suddenly blushed and woke up from her longing. She lowered her head and said, "I'm sorry to make you laugh. Hey, Miss Kai, if you want to achieve this goal, there is a very key problem to solve." Old Toad said with a smile. What? Kai was stunned. To find a Mr. Right. If I don't have a Mr. Right, what's the use of this wedding dress and wedding wine? Old Toad said with a smile. Kai's pretty face suddenly turned red, like the rosy clouds burning in the sky. Alu couldn't help but be happy. Kai was really a lovable lady. That bright and clear character, that kind and innocent nature, was as beautiful as the spring breeze in March. At night, Old Toad suddenly reminded Lin Sun, "Big brother, if we want to return to the mortal world in the future, I'm afraid we still need Miss Kai's help." What do you mean? Lin Sun asked. The Cloud Weaver tribe is not simple. Their ancestor was a great legendary figure who was good at an extremely magical secret method. He could see the laws of heaven and earth as silk threads and cut the real heavenly clothes. Old Toad said mysteriously, "Heavenly clothes are the supreme treasure that even the great emperors are attracted by." Different laws of heaven and earth have different magical effects. Some can avoid the tribulations of heaven and earth. Some can ignore the shackles of rules and travel through the mysterious areas outside the void. And some can be turned into treasures comparable to emperor weapons. Because the Cloud Weaver tribe rarely appears in the world, few people know their origin and rumors. If I hadn't awakened the power of memory in my bloodline, I wouldn't have known these secrets of the past. Of course, the most important thing is that if we want to return to the mortal world, we inevitably need to enter the void tunnel between realms. And the Cloud Weaver tribe is best at space travel. With their help, it will be much easier for us to return to the mortal world in the future. Speaking of this, Lin Sun suddenly understood. As for the problem of returning to the mortal world, Lin Sun had also thought about it. The only tricky problem was how to go back. When he came to the ancient desolation from the mortal world, he broke a void tunnel with the power of the 5 colors holy formation of the empire. But now it was doomed to be impossible. According to Zhao Jingxian, there was more than one way to the mortal world in the ancient desolation. For example, some ancient orthodoxies, such as the Holy Land of Spiritual Treasure and the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land, all had such a way. But as early as a few years ago, before the Great Era really came, the power of heaven and earth in the ancient desolation had changed dramatically. The void passageways that led to the lower realms in the past had almost all collapsed and disintegrated along with the arrival of this shocking change. Even Zhao Jingxian himself was helpless about it. He could only take one step at a time and assess the situation. Therefore, for Lin Sun at this time, if he wanted to return to the mortal world, the first thing to solve was the problem of the way. And the proposal of the old toad made Lin Sun's heart tremble. The Cloud Weaver tribe. Who could imagine that a girl like Kai Kai came from such a mysterious tribe? And the mysterious heavenly clothes reminded Lin Sun of the way to make the armor with spiritual tattoos. Although the two were different, they had some similarities. Moreover, the ancient desolation was so vast, but it was extremely strange that Lin Sun had never seen anyone with an armor with spiritual tattoos since he started his cultivation. In the mortal world, every spiritual tattooist knew about the armor with spiritual tattoos. According to Lin Sun's speculation, there must be other secrets. Similarly, if the old toad didn't mention the heavenly clothes this time, Lin Sun wouldn't have known that there was such a magical treasure in the world. Forget it. If we really can't do anything in the future, it won't be too late to ask Kai Kai for help. Lin Sun thought for a while and made a decision. He didn't want to trouble Kai Kai. Kai Kai might be happy to help him, but would the Cloud Weaver tribe behind her do the same? That might not be the case. Moreover, Lin Sun still had some things to solve. Even if he returned to the ancient desolation domain, he couldn't return to the mortal world immediately. Old Toad, you and Alu get ready. When we leave the absolute summit domain, I'm afraid there will be some troubles. Lin Sun ordered. Troubles? The old toad was stunned and suddenly remembered the siege they suffered when they left the ultimate ruins. Now, they were about to leave the absolute summit domain. Would similar things happen again? I've killed so many so-called peerless figures. If the forces behind these guys know this, how can they bear it? Lin Sun's dark eyes were deep, and he said indifferently, in the past, we could only face it passively. Life and death were beyond our control. But this time, I don't want to be so passive anymore. The old toad nodded and said, the Sunset Tang Valley where the golden crows are entrenched is near the guiding place when we return. If those old monsters of the golden crows know that those little crows have been killed by us, they will definitely fly into a rage and pounce on us. Well, it can be foreseen that there will be sages, and there may be a lot of them. Lin Sun's eyes drifted. But in his heart, he was calm. After 10 years in the absolute summit domain, he had enough trump cards to face all this. P.S. Tonight's update may be a little late. Don't be impatient, everyone. In addition, thank you for your gifts and monthly votes. Tonight, I will definitely continue to update. So, continue to ask for subscriptions. Chapter 1356. Woo, woo, woo. In the ancient battlefield, the wind was howling. In the past, very few people would come to this desolate and oppressive battlefield. But recently, numerous experts had come here successively. Near the battlefield, there was an ancient and solemn city. It stood between the sky and the earth, as if it had existed since the beginning of time. It was the City of Welcome. 10 years ago, countless experts of the younger generation had entered the supreme realms from here in search of fortuitous encounters that even sages would be envious of. 10 years. The great world has changed the ancient desolation territory and the fates of countless experts. How different will the juniors who have entered the absolute territory be when they come back? A simple-looking old man in a Taoist robe and a tall crown stood on a light purple cloud with his hands behind his back as he sighed with emotion. Countless experts were waiting nearby. They came from different forces. The reason why they were waiting here was to welcome the experts who were about to return from the absolute territory. Hearing the old man in the Taoist robe, many people were moved. 10 years had passed. The ancient desolation territory was completely different. Many ancient orthodoxies had become stronger and more powerful. Many orthodoxies had disappeared from the world in the 10 years of bloody annexation. The great world was splendid. Not only the absolute territory, but the entire ancient desolation territory had also given birth to countless opportunities, auspicious signs, and good fortune. Mountains and rivers had changed, and the world had changed. Over the past 10 years, countless experts had risen in the great world. They were like wild weeds that had grown crazily in the world. The more experts there were, the fiercer the competition was. The ancient forces in the world didn't want to be left out. They had tried their best to expand in the past 10 years, trying to become the overlord of the great world. Over the past 10 years, blood had been shed, wars had been fought, and the flames of war had been raging. That was the most splendid, great world that had never been seen before. At the same time, countless bloody storms had broken out in the past 10 years, which could be said to be unprecedented. Now, thinking of the shocking changes in the past 10 years, the experts couldn't help but sigh, no matter who they were. The great world was a chaotic world that was already recognized by the world. The great world has always been like this. Only the strong can rise, and only the great forces can survive. This is called natural selection. On the other side, an old man in a black robe with white hair and beard said indifferently. He was riding on the back of a huge black snake. The surroundings were deathly silent. The old man's name was Hua Xingxiu. He came from the Beast Spirit Mountain and was an old monster at the immortal realm Seventh Tribulation. In fact, most of the experts that were able to make an appearance in the vicinity of the City of Guidance were seniors at the King Realm or above. For example, the old man in the Taoist robe, and he was riding on a light purple cloud. He was also an old monster who had stepped on the immortal Tao. His Taoist name was Tuaching Zi, and he came from the Xuandu Tao sect. They represented different sects and had come to welcome the disciples that were about to return from the region of despair. So, it couldn't be said to be condescending, because they were clearly aware that if nothing unexpected happened, then most of the experts that were able to survive these 10 years of competition and return safely would definitely be able to break through into the King Realm. Haha, don't worry. When those juniors return, they'll definitely be reborn, and they can't be compared to the past. A beautiful woman in violet clothes chuckled. She sat in the carriage with a gorgeous and charming appearance, and when her gaze inadvertently moved, she gave others the feeling that she'd experienced the vicissitudes of life. She was the old monster of the Ocean Soul clan, Shang Luwei. She was called Madame Shang. Juniors? Madame Shang, I'm afraid you have to change the way you address them. In the past, if those juniors became supreme monarchs, then be it in terms of foundation or cultivation, they could be considered to be of the same generation as us. Tua Chengzi from the Xuandu Dao sect sighed with emotion. All the old monsters at the King Realm had complicated expressions when they heard this. After 10 years, those juniors were about to become existences of the same generation as them. Not only had their statuses changed, but even their cultivations were different. In the past, they looked down on, disregarded, and didn't care about these juniors. But now, such a situation was bound to cease. This was the profundity of the absolute region. It gathered supreme fortune. And in a mere 10 years, it was sufficient for a group of young people to rise up like rebirth and transform into overlords of the world. On the other hand, which one of these old monsters at the king realm hadn't cultivated for hundreds or thousands of years, gone through innumerable hardships, and experienced innumerable tribulations to attain their current accomplishments? Such a comparison inevitably caused a huge gap to arise in their hearts. The discussions continued, and time flowed by. More and more experts from different factions appeared in the vicinity of the receiving ground, waiting for their turn. Such scenes were playing out in different areas of the ancient Desolation region. There were 3,000 guiding grounds in the ancient Desolation region, and they corresponded to the 3,000 worlds in the Absolute region. Now, as the time for the Absolute region to end was approaching, the vicinity of these guiding grounds had become the center of attention. Send someone to guide the members of my Heavenly Sword sect. A dignified voice resounded in the Heavenly Sword sect in White Jade Capital. On that day, a few old monsters at the Longevity Tribulation realm who had been in closed-door cultivation for a long time walked out of White Jade Capital. It's about time for them to come back. I wonder how many of them have reached the Extinction King realm this time. In the Spirit Treasure Holy Land, old monsters also appeared and went to the guiding grounds. The Heavenly Sword sect, the Spirit Treasure Holy Land, the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land, the Immortal Pure Land, the Profound Seeking Sword House, the Black Sea Tengu clan, the Ancient Orthodoxies and clans all sent experts. The sacred hermits in different areas of the ancient Desolation region, such as the Heavenless sect, the Sacred Fire sect, and the Great Earth Treasury Temple, also reacted. The juniors of the Absolute region were about to return after the Absolute 10 years. For all the big forces in the ancient Desolation region, it was a big event. A large number of Extinction King realm cultivators are destined to appear in the Absolute 10 years. Each of them can be called the true gods' favored ones. I wonder who among the Absolute 10 years can be called the number one. It must be Yin Qingbai. No, it could also be those ancient freaks with incomparably strong foundations. What are you guessing for? When the Absolute region ends, all the news will be spread out. These days, in different provinces and different cities in the ancient Desolation region, people were talking about the Absolute region. Countless creatures, billions of living beings, all fixed their eyes on the same thing. They were waiting for the return of the Absolute 10 years. 3 days later, boom! In the sky above the ancient Desolation region, a loud bang sounded, shaking the 9 heavens and the 10 earths. The sound was so loud that all the creatures in different areas of the ancient Desolation region were shaken. Then they all realized that the Absolute region would end today. Rumble, the earth and the sky shook violently, as if an earth dragon was turning over. In the sky above the 3,000 guiding grounds, the void cracked open, and a giant void door appeared, attracting countless people's attention. They're coming out. Quick, get ready. Whoever dares to make trouble in the dark will be killed without mercy. Noisy shouts and shouts started to ring out. At this moment, all the experts of the big forces didn't dare to be careless. They were afraid that someone would attack the disciples who had returned from the Absolute region. After all, those disciples had great fortunes. If they were killed, the loss would be so severe that no force could bear it. In front of the ancient battlefield, Tuoching Zi of the Xian Du Dao sect, Madame Shang of the Sea Soul clan, Huaxing Chu of the Thousand Bee Spiritual Mountain, and other old monsters of the King realm were also on guard. Everyone, don't panic. The Golden Crow clan is here. Who dares to make trouble? An old woman with golden flames flowing around her body said proudly. The old woman was Wu Jinhuan, an 8th Retribution Immortal Realm old monster. Her words didn't make the others feel relieved. Instead, they sneered secretly. They weren't worried about anyone else, but the Golden Crows would stir up trouble at this time. The Sunset Tang Valley, where the Gold Crows resided, was located 8,000 miles away from here. As a sacred place in the ancient Desolation region, the Golden Crow clan's foundation and power were naturally extremely strong. Who wouldn't be worried if they had bad intentions? They're coming out. Many people were excited when they saw the tide-like figures coming out of the void tunnel in the sky above the guiding city. Disciples of Nebulous Sect, come to me, an old monster shouted. His voice was as loud as thunder, summoning the disciples who were returning. Descendants of the Black Sparrow clan, come over here. For a moment, many old monsters shouted loudly, their voices resounding through the sky and earth. They also took the opportunity to bring back batch after batch of juniors, which made them heave a sigh of relief. The liveliness lasted for a long time. After all, there were millions of experts who entered the burning celestial realm. No matter how many casualties there would still be a large number of survivors. What's going on? Where are the disciples of the Golden Crow clan? Suddenly, the old woman Wu Jinhuan of the Golden Crow clan let out a furious scream that shook the surroundings. Everyone, have you seen the descendants of Xiandu Dao sect? Why haven't the descendants of the Thousand Beast Spirit Mountain appeared? Where are the descendants of the Sea Spirit clan? Where did they go? At the same time, Tuo Chengzi, Hua Xingxiu, Madame Shang, and the other old monsters were shocked and angry, because not a single disciple had appeared up until now, and this caused a wisp of a bad premonition to arise in their hearts. They were all killed by Lin's son. A gray-robed man who returned from the zone of extinction couldn't help but reveal the truth. What? In an instant, the gazes of the old monsters all turned to look at the gray-robed man who had spoken. I said they've all been killed. Everyone here knows about this. The gray-robed man broke out in cold sweat as he spoke hurriedly. Is this true? The faces of Wu Jinhuan and the others turned gloomy, and their gazes swept past the experts who returned from the zone of extinction. All of them had various expressions, but they tacitly agreed. This was the truth, and it would be known sooner or later. It couldn't be concealed. Many old monsters at the King Realm couldn't help but gasp when they witnessed this scene. A single person killed the disciples of so many great powers? It was too ruthless. On the other hand, Wu Jinhuan and the others were like volcanoes that were on the verge of eruption. Their expressions were gloomy and livid to the extreme, and it was indescribably terrifying. The second chapter was delivered. Goldfish continued writing. Please don't be long-winded about the subscriptions. It's really very important. If you have the ability, please support us by reading pirated copies. Thank you in advance. Chapter 1357. Lin Sun. 10 years ago, this name had already spread throughout the ancient Desolation region. He was one of the most outstanding cultivators among the younger generation. He was born in the lower realm and fought alone. He rose through slaughter and was called Demon God Lin by the world. Even old monsters like Wu Jinhuan and Hua Xingxiu, who had been living in seclusion for years, had heard of this junior's name. However, as cultivators in the immortality realm, they didn't care about Lin Sun. They cared about the mysterious woman behind Lin Sun. 10 years ago, there was a huge incident that shook the world. A mysterious woman used a saint as a pet and destroyed the 6 major sects, including the Heavenly Sword Sect, the Black Sea Dog Tribe, and the Heaven's Pivot Sacred Ground. Her motive was simple. She wanted to stand up for Lin Sun. At that time, the 6 major sects could only lower their heads before the mysterious woman and let her leave safely. The commotion caused by this incident was enough to shock any saint, let alone Wu Jinhuan and the others. However, they didn't expect that Lin Sun, a junior, would kill the disciples of their sects in the zone of extinction. What's going on? Wu Jinhuan's thin and narrow face was filled with violence. She was on the verge of going berserk. Hua Xingxiu, Tuo Chengzi, and the other old monsters were the same. Soon, they learned the truth of the incident, and the truth couldn't be hidden at all. Everyone in the celestial burning realm knew that Demon God Lin had wiped out the territories of the Golden Crow tribe, the Ocean Soul tribe, and 1,000 Beast Spiritual Mountain the first year he entered the celestial burning city. Back then, blood dyed the celestial burning city red, and the stench of blood lingered for 10 days. This Lin bastard deserves to die 1,000 times for his crimes. Wu Jinhuan let out an extremely resentful scream. This enmity can't be resolved peacefully. Hua Xingqiu's face was livid, and his heart was bleeding. Where is he? Then they locked their gazes on the void tunnel with murderous intent. Their auras were violent, as if they were about to devour someone. The atmosphere was dead silent, and everyone's hearts trembled. Only the howling wind echoed in the ancient battlefield, adding a sense of murderous intent to the dead atmosphere. Looks like these old guys still don't know who they are. Do they really think this is still 10 years ago? Someone in the crowd sneered inwardly. These were some experts who stood at the pinnacle, and as soon as they came out, they received a grand welcome from the elders of the sect. Only they knew how terrifying Lin Sun was now. However, it didn't remind him. This matter didn't concern them, and they didn't want to get involved in this kind of dispute. After all, the outside world was different from the region of extinction in the end. Wu Jinhuan and the other old monsters all had major factions standing behind them. They could not help but be wary of them. At the same time, these Supreme Kings were not optimistic about Lin Sun's situation. If those great powers were to find out what he had done in the absolute nothingness domain, they would probably be angered to the point that even saints would attack. Lin Sun might be extremely powerful and could be called the first in the absolute domain. But after all, it was impossible for him to be the opponent of a saint. Lin Sun is out. Someone shouted. Whoosh! At the same time, a tall figure walked out from the spatial passageway in the sky above the City of Guidance. His clothes fluttered with the wind, and he possessed an extraordinary bearing. It was exactly Lin Sun. At this instant, the gazes of everyone in the surroundings shot over in unison, and the atmosphere became even more silent and oppressive. The air seemed to freeze. You're the bastard with the surname Lin? At this instant, Wu Jinhuan was the first to lose control. He spoke coldly, and a terrifying killing intent spread out from his body. Lin Sun's expression was indifferent. His eyes swept across the surroundings and finally fell on Wu Jinhuan, Hua Xingqiu, and other old monsters of the King Realm. Just you old things? He frowned, seeming to be a little surprised. This stunned everyone present. As expected of Demon God Lin, even when he was in such a dangerous situation, his expression didn't change, and he was extremely courageous. You evil creature, how dare you speak so sharp-tongued? Hua Xingqiu, Hua Xingzi, Madame Shang, and the others were furious. Do you really think we don't dare to kill you with that mysterious saintess backing you up? Lin Sun said indifferently, You're wrong. I'm also a strong man of the King Realm now. To deal with you, I alone am enough. His words were full of disdain. Some supreme figures sighed in their hearts. This was Lin Sun. No matter what kind of situation he was in, he was full of courage. But for Wu Jinhuan and the others, this was simply the biggest provocation to their dignity. A junior who had only trained in the region of extinction for 10 years dared to disregard existences like them, and Lin Sun's action at this moment was really as if he was ignoring them. He merely glanced at the surroundings for a moment before stepping into the void and heading off into the distance. From the beginning to the end, he no longer paid attention to the clamoring of Wu Jinhuan and the others. His contemptuous and dismissive attitude immediately ignited the killing intent of Wu Jinhuan and the others. Evil creature, die! Wu Jinhuan screamed, and his body glowed. He dashed out and grabbed with his palm. A dazzling golden claw condensed and slapped at Lin Sun. Boom! Even the void suddenly exploded. The nearby strong people all retreated, unwilling to be involved in such a fight. Unfortunately, Lin Sun still ignored this terrifying attack as if he didn't feel it all. He just frowned and looked into the distance, puzzled. This time, when he returned to the ancient desolation territory, the only thing worthy of his attention were the sages. But until now, he hadn't found any aura of the sages. This seemed a little abnormal. Bang! Before the golden claw got close to Lin Sun, it was disintegrated by an invisible force, and the light rain exploded. This stunned Wu Jinhuan, and his face darkened. He suddenly realized that Lin Sun might not be an ordinary King Realm cultivator. No wonder he dared to be so fearless. Kill! On the other side, Hua Xingqiu also couldn't help but attack. He waved his sleeve, and thousands of phantoms of fierce beasts soared into the sky. They turned into a torrent and rushed toward Lin's Sun. Boom! The light around Lin's Sun turned, and the terrifying attack collapsed with a boom and disappeared in the void. Looking from afar, he seemed to be invincible. Wu Jinhuan, Hua Xingqiu, and the other old monsters were shocked. Their minds became clearer, and they realized that there was something wrong with their opponent. But when they looked at Lin's Sun, they couldn't sense any threat from him at all. He was too calm. There were only two possibilities. One was that his strength was like this. The other was that his cultivation was too strong and terrifying that they couldn't see through him. No matter what, we must kill this bastard this time. Madame Shang attacked. She took out an emerald flying knife, and with a buzz, it cut through the void like cutting paper. It tore open a long and narrow crack in the void. It was shockingly sharp. This was her life royal weapon. It had been nurtured for 1,000 years, so its power was naturally extraordinary. Swoosh! The emerald flying knife slashed down like a green bolt of lightning, so dazzling that people couldn't open their eyes. This attack shocked many of the experts present. How could the power of a longevity 7th tribulation king be ordinary? But what made countless people dumbfounded was that Lin Sun raised his hand and grabbed the emerald flying knife as if he was picking a flower. His movements were slow and natural, but it made everyone look at him and gasp. Buzz! The emerald flying knife struggled violently in Lin Sun's palm, but it couldn't break free no matter what. In the distance, Madame Shang's expression changed drastically. Do you know what a peerless king is? Lin Sun turned around and asked indifferently. Wu Jinhuan and the others were shocked. They had already calmed down after testing Lin Sun for so long, and they realized that something was wrong. To be able to cultivate to their level, none of them were fools. Especially when they saw Lin Sun grab Madame Shang's life royal weapon with a casual grab, they immediately understood. The Lin Sun in front of them was no longer a junior that they could look down on and suppress. He was a true, peerless king. What made them the most uncertain was that although they had cultivated for a long time, they didn't know or experience the power of a peerless king. It was because of this that they dared to attack without restraint. Lin Sun, you killed all the disciples of our faction. Even if you are an existence that has stepped into the peerless king realm, you are destined to die. To watching Z said coldly, if you surrender now, we might give you a chance to turn over a new leaf. Although his words were cold, everyone could tell that his attitude had changed. He didn't dare to be arrogant anymore, and only dared to threaten Lin Sun. However, what he said was right. Even if Lin Sun was a peerless king, how could he fight against those great factions? Right, you have never seen a peerless king realm cultivator, so you naturally don't know what it means. I asked a useless question. Lin Sun laughed at himself. But when these words fell into the ears of Wu Jinhuan and the others, they seemed to be mocking their ignorance, and it caused their faces to become extremely ugly. Only the peerless kings present understood Lin Sun's feelings, and they couldn't help but sigh with emotion. These old fellows probably didn't realize that the era they represented was going to become a thing of the past. In the future, the ancient Desolation region was destined to be led by the peerless figures. Little bastard, how dare you be so arrogant in the territory of the Golden Crow bloodline? I think you are really tired of living. Wu Jinhuan was the most confident because the Sunset Tang Valley, where the Golden Crow bloodline resided, was just 8,000 miles away. At this moment, Lin Sun attacked. Clang! The emerald green flying knife in his palm droned as it swiftly flashed out, and it was inconceivably swift and fierce to an unimaginable extent. Poof! In the next moment, Wu Jinhuan's head flew into the air, and blood sprayed like a fountain. In an instant, an old immortal 7th Tribulation realm monster was killed just like that, casually killing the enemy in an instant. This unexpected and bloody scene immediately shocked everyone present. Hua Xingqiu's expression changed. However, just as he was about to say something, he felt a pain in his throat. His vision turned black, and he instantly lost consciousness. His head was also thrown into the air, drawing a beautiful and poignant arc in the air. P.S. Here's the third update. Don't look down on Wu Jinhuan and the others for being stupid. It can only be said that they know nothing about the Peerless King realm. Also, as long as the subscriptions increase, Goldfish will add more updates tomorrow. Come subscribe to Zongheng. Goldfish is waiting for you. Chapter 1358. The 10 years of the Great Era had not only changed the ancient Desolation realm, but also the fate of many powerhouses. The most obvious change was the emergence of a large number of King Realm powerhouses in the past 10 years. The old monsters of the King Realm, who were already on the path of immortality, also took advantage of the opportunity of the Great Era to improve their cultivation by leaps and bounds. But it was only 10 years after all. Old monsters like Wu Jinhuan and Hua Xingxiu were already overlords in the ancient Desolation realm 10 years ago. On the path of longevity, he could be considered a senior expert. But now, the two old monsters, Wu Jinhuan and Hua Xingxiu, were beheaded in an instant. Their blood splattered across the sky. From beginning to end, they didn't have time to resist or react. The entire place was silent. On the vast ancient battlefield, countless powerhouses felt a chill in their hearts, and their expressions changed. Was this the power of the Peerless King realm? But wasn't it too heaven-defying? The old monsters of the 7th Retribution of Longevity realm could dominate any area in the ancient Desolation realm without the help of sages. But they were as vulnerable as chickens and dogs in front of Lin Sun. Only the top figures on the battlefield knew that Lin Sun wasn't just a simple Peerless King realm. His cultivation was also at the 7th Retribution of Longevity realm. Not to mention killing these old monsters of the same cultivation, he could even kill the enemies of higher realms. The number 1 person in the Peerless realm and number 1 on the Tianjiao Golden List. Such titles were enough to dominate the entire Upper 9 realms. How could anyone challenge his powerful combat power? Wu Jinhuan and Hua Xingxiu might be experienced and knowledgeable. Unfortunately, they knew nothing about the Peerless realm. Madame Shang screamed as if she had suffered a great shock. She rushed up and ran away with all her might. In fact, she didn't even want her royal armament anymore. At the same time, Tuo Chengzi also panicked and chose to run away. The death of Wu Jinhuan and Hua Xingxiu was like a heavy hammer that completely shattered their confidence and made them realize how terrifying the young man in front of them was. Such a young man was no longer a junior that they could corrupt, trample, and trample on at will. He was a terrifying existence that could stand on equal footing with them, or even suppress them. If that was all there was to it, they could reluctantly accept it. After all, even if they couldn't win, they could at least rely on the great forces behind them to deter them. But what made them collapse was that Lin was not afraid of the threat at all. Therefore, he could only escape. Puff! The emerald green flying knife flashed and flew through the air. Then, another head was chopped off. It was Madame Shang from the Sea Soul race. Her head was tossed into the air. Because of inertia, the headless corpse was still fleeing through the void. After several breaths of time, it crashed down from the void. His head and body were separated from each other for 8,000 zhang. That strange scene caused everyone to feel a chill run down their spines. At the same time, Lin Sun had already disappeared from where he was. With an incredible speed, he blocked Tuo Chengzi's way. Tuo Chengzi's body stiffened. He stopped in his tracks, and his heart sank to the bottom. He said bitterly, "Lin Sun, can you spare my life?" Lin Sun answered him by waving his sleeves. Boom! Tuo Chengzi roared in anger. He used all of his strength to defend, but in the end, it was useless. The difference in strength was too great. His figure suddenly crumbled and turned into ashes, scattering in the air. With a flick of his sleeves, he turned into ashes. The world was silent, the birds were silent, and all the heroes were dumbfounded. Even those who stood at the peak couldn't help but be shaken. In just a moment, all the old monsters were killed one by one. It was as easy as tearing paintings. Looking at Lin Sun again, he was as calm and elegant as before. Who else wants to avenge your disciples? Feel free to step forward. Lin Sun glanced at the audience. His clothes fluttered in the air. Although his breath was as calm as the flowing clouds, his momentum was powerful enough to swallow mountains and rivers. The audience became more and more silent. No one dared to respond. Countless questions surged in everyone's mind. How powerful was Lin Sun now? In these 10 years at the peak, how many unknown transformations had occurred in his body? Farewell, everyone. Seeing that no one responded, Lin Sun glanced at those peerless figures he had met several times and cupped his hands in obeisance. Then his figure flashed and floated away. From beginning to end, no one dared to stop him. After a long time, the silence in the field was broken. Those who came to greet Lin Sun began to ask about what had happened in the absolute domain in the past 10 years. Among them, the most eye-catching was the deeds of Lin Sun. I'm ashamed that I didn't enter the upper 9 realms, so I don't know what Lin Sun has experienced, but I'm sure that he has set foot in the King of Extinction Realm. Most of the strong people who returned from the absolute domain stayed in the immortal burning world and had no chance to enter the upper 9 realms. Naturally, we didn't know what Lin Sun had done in the upper 9 realms. In the upper 9 realms, Lin Sun first wiped out the places where the Golden Crow clan, the Sea Spirit clan, and other great forces were entrenched. These questions were answered by those peerless figures. In the following years, he killed one peerless figure after another, such as Mingzi, Bai Longting, Gu Fozi. As more and more people learned about Lin Sun, the atmosphere in the field became more and more silent. Some old monsters were even covered in cold sweat, trembling with fear, and even breathing was difficult. It turned out that Lin Sun was not a simple king of Extinction Realm. On the road to immortality, he could be called an overlord like a demon. What? Yun Qingbai was killed by Lin Sun? When they learned that Lin Sun had killed Yun Qingbai on the demon shopping platform, the atmosphere that had been suppressed for a long time suddenly erupted like a volcano that had been accumulating power for a long time. The whole field was in an uproar, and the exclamations resounded through the sky. Everyone's face was full of shock. At the same time, the other 2,999 receiving places in the ancient desolation realm were also in an uproar. How is this possible? Many old monsters were shocked and lost their voices. It was unknown how many experts had fallen into a daze because of this news. This news was indeed too shocking. Yun Qingbai, a legendary peerless figure of Sword Tao, died in the absolute domain and could never return. Who could believe it? It was as if a sun that should have risen and illuminated the ancient desolation realm suddenly fell from the sky. It was easy to imagine how much shock it caused. Is this young man already invincible in the absolute domain? When they learned that Lin Sun entered the ultimate place of inheritance as the first on the Tianjiao Golden List and finally defeated all the heroes and became the first in the absolute domain, everyone was stunned. One person, in 10 years at the peak, created an undefeatable and invincible legend. This day, the ancient desolation realm was in an uproar. After 10 years, the young man who was despised and ignored by countless ancient orthodoxies had now risen to the top of the road to immortality. The number of peerless figures who had died in his hands was uncountable. Among them were Yun Qingbai, Ming Child, Gu Fozi, Bai Longting, and other prominent figures. All of this news swept across the entire realm of ancient desolation like a storm in the background of this great world. This young man has become a great power. When some ancient orthodoxies heard this news, they were all shocked and sighed with emotion. This was fate. In 10 years, because of the absolute domain, a peerless figure like a monster was created. His existence was destined to be the focus of the world. He killed so many disciples of the big forces. How would he let it go? Back then, he had the support of the mysterious Saintess. Now, will the mysterious Saintess still shield him from the wind and rain? Wrong. Even if the mysterious Saintess is still alive, she can't resist the revenge of so many big forces. Countless discussions resounded in the ancient desolation realm. The absolute domain had indeed come to an end, but everyone knew that Lin Sun, who was crowned as the first in the absolute domain, would usher in a big storm. Back then, because of the mysterious saintess, our sky-reaching sword sect chose to bow our heads. But this time we won't do that. In the sky-reaching sword sect in white jade Jing, an old voice sounded. Kuya, Yushio, go out and bring back the sky-reaching sword and this young man's head. That day, in the forbidden area of the back mountain of the sky-reaching sword sect, two old antiques who had been in closed-door training for countless years stepped out of the gate. The Arhut is also in trouble. In an old and inconspicuous temple in the Great Earth Treasury Temple, a skinny old monk sitting cross-legged let out a sigh. As expected, this heretic can't be left alive. The old monk picked up the wooden fish next to him and gently knocked it. Dong! An invisible Zen sound resounded in the bitter, forbidden land of the Great Earth Treasury Temple. The bitter, forbidden land was the place where the sages of the Great Earth Treasury Temple cultivated in seclusion. It was also one of the forbidden areas of the Great Earth Treasury Temple. Senior brother F.A. Zhang, there's one thing that I need you to do. In the temple, the old monk spoke slowly. This young man must be killed. If the mysterious saintess attacks, she will definitely become the enemy of all the big forces. I'm afraid that even she can't bear the consequences. However, for safety's sake, don't reveal your identities. As a sage, it's easy for me to kill a supreme king in the seventh retribution of the immortality realm. Go! On this day, the Sea Soul clan, the Xuandu Taoist sect, the Beast Spiritual Mountain, the Moon-worshipping sect, and other ancient orthodoxies all took action. On this day, all the sages in the ancient desolation realm went out. The killing tribulation is coming. In the divine secret pavilion of the Saint Hermit grounds, a sage had a sudden impulse and made a divination. The divination was blood like a rainbow covering the world. In the 10th year of the Grand Era, the absolute domain has come to an end. Because of Lin Sun alone, the ancient desolation realm was shaken. Dragons and snakes rose from the land. The heavens sent a killing disaster, and all the sages went out. This is something that has never happened before. Under this tribulation, regardless of success or failure, this young man can be called a hero of the present age and leave his name in history. In the divine secret pavilion, a sage held a brush and wrote. Every word and sentence was enshrouded in Taoist light, as if it was branded in history. His pen name was Spring and Autumn. His name was written in history. With the power of a sage and the brush of spring and autumn, what was recorded in the book of history would definitely be something that would shock the world and be remembered by the future generations. And today, Lin Sun's name appeared in the book of history. P.S. Demon God Lin, who is threatened by the sages, said, "Fellow Taoists, please subscribe to increase your combat power. Waiting online, urgent." Chapter 1359. There was a small bug in the previous chapter. The doppelganger of ancient Buddha was defeated by Lin Sun. It was Yun Qingbai who killed him. The world was boundless. After leaving the guiding city, Lin Sun's figure was as swift as lightning, galloping in the void. Old Toad, Alu, something is wrong. Although the sages haven't shown up, I suspect that they are hiding in the dark. Lin Sun transmitted his voice. Now Old Toad, Alu, and Kai Kai were all hiding in the wordless pagoda. This was also to prevent any accidents from happening. Lin Sun could control the situation to avoid being restrained by too many people. You must be careful of the golden crows. These crows are unruly and vengeful. Their territory, Sunset Tang Valley, is nearby. Old Toad reminded him quickly. I know. The most urgent thing is to leave here first. Speaking of this, Lin Sun suddenly noticed something. He paused in the void and looked into the distance. Boom! Almost at the same time, a dazzling golden brilliance swept over from a very far distance. In an instant, it had arrived nearby, as if it had teleported. Accompanying this was a pressure that covered the heavens and the earth, and it caused this expanse of the heavens and the earth to wail, while the rocks in the vicinity exploded into pieces and the ground cracked apart. This was the aura of the Saint Realm. Young man, do you think you can run away? In the cold and indifferent voice, the golden rainbow turned into an old man. He was dressed in a golden robe, his cheeks were thin, and his eyes were surging with frightening golden flames, as dazzling as a pair of suns. Standing there casually, he gave people the aura of a saint who controlled the world and all kinds of laws, oppressing the sky. The golden crow? Lin Sun's black eyes narrowed. What he wanted really came true. I'm Wu Willow Chi, the ninth priest of the Sun Crow clan. Young man, I've already heard of what you did in the region of extinction. I'll give you a chance. Obediently follow me to Sunset Tang Valley. Otherwise, don't blame me for bullying you. Wu Yo Chi looked indifferent. As a sage, he had the foundation and strength to overlook all living beings. In his eyes, even if Lin Sun had stepped into the peak of the King realm and his combat strength was extremely formidable on the path to immortality, it was still insufficient. As far as I know, setting Suntang Valley is 8,000 miles away from the City of Guidance. Even if they rushed over after hearing the news, it's impossible for them to catch up to me in such a short time. Lin Sun's black eyes flashed. Have you been hiding in the dark before? Is this question very important? Wu Yochi's face was expressionless. He stepped forward, and with every step he took, the world shook. The earth quaked, the mountains swayed, and the void was thrown into chaos. At the same time, the terrifying pressure on his body grew stronger and stronger, and it was like a shadow that covered the sky. I'll count to 3. If you don't lower your head, die. Wu Luqi spoke, his eyes cold and emotionless. Anyone below the sage level was like an ant. Lin Sun, on the other hand, was like an ant in the eyes of Dark Willow Pool. 1. An indifferent voice resounded, like a note of death. With the voice, Dark Willow Pool approached step by step, and every step he took was earth-shattering. For a time, the world wailed, and everything trembled. The invisible pressure of the sage flooded the world like a tide. If other strong practitioners were here, they would have been unable to bear it. Their mind would have collapsed, and they would have coughed up blood and fallen to the ground. Even Lin Sun felt an extremely great pressure at this moment, causing his entire body to tense up like a fully drawn bow. He had rarely encountered such a feeling in the 10 years he had been in the Peerless Realm. This was the Sage Realm. Standing on the road to immortality, it shined as brightly as the sun and the moon, and lived as long as the world. It could turn the rain and clouds into thunder. Let me guess, the reason why you chose to come here at this time is that you have no choice. After all, if you escape, you can't avenge the disciples of your clan. But if your opponent attacks you, you're afraid of provoking someone you shouldn't provoke, right? Lin Sun looked calm and spoke in an orderly manner. Strictly speaking, this was the first time he had faced the oppression of a sage since he started cultivating. The pressure he endured was great, but it was not enough to shake his mind. A touch of surprise flashed in Dark Willow Pool's eyes, and then he said coldly, "You're quite bold." Boom! The void exploded, which was extremely harsh. 2. His lips were as light as a thunderclap. At this moment, Lin Sun took a deep breath and ran all his cultivation to the extreme. In an instant, he seemed to be a different person. Every inch of his skin was flowing with brilliant Taoist light, and his momentum was like that of a demon. Today, I'd like to experience the ability of a sage with the cultivation of the 7 tribulations of Longevity Realm. Lin Sun's eyes burst out with burning fighting intent. He really wanted to know how big the gap between himself and the Sage Realm was. This approach might be extremely crazy. If other strong practitioners knew it, they would think that he was courting death. But Lin Sun was not afraid at all. Long before he left the Peerless Domain, he had such an idea. An ant trying to shake a tree. A strong disdain appeared on Dark Willow Pool's face, and he even suspected that he had heard wrong. Since ancient times, which strong practitioner in the Longevity Realm dared to provoke a sage like this? Wasn't he afraid of being slapped to death? 3. Dark Willow Pool no longer hesitated, and his eyes flashed with killing intent. Whoosh! Almost at the same time, his figure flashed and disappeared out of thin air. When he appeared again, he was already in front of Lin Sun, and suddenly pressed out his palm. Void moving. Only a sage could control the power. This sort of speed had completely broken free from the restraints of the void and broken the shackles of the void. If it were other strong practitioners, they wouldn't even have time to react. But at the moment when Dark Willow Pool attacked, a bright and unparalleled fist force had already swept out. This punch could be regarded as the embodiment of Lin Sun's strongest power at present. It was used with the Star Obliteration Devouring Way, and contained all kinds of power of the Great Way. And the anger of Yazi, the Fighting Saint method, and the Eternal Leakless method had already burst out, pouring all the essence, chi, and spirit of Lin Sun into this punch. It was no exaggeration to say that in the face of this punch, even people like Yun Qingbai and Prince Xiaohao must be prepared and go all out. Boom! An earth-shattering collision sounded, and the void collapsed with a rumble. The land in all directions seemed to have exploded, creating a strange vacuum. As for Lin Sun, his figure flew backward in the void, as if he was out of control. He barely stabilized his figure after flying 100 meters away. Is this the power of the Saint Realm? Lin Sun's breathing was rapid, and his chi and blood were tumbling. He had the urge to cough up blood, but his black eyes were extremely bright, and he looked like he was nothing special. It's just a casual blow. Do you really think I can't kill you? Dark Willow Pool snorted coldly. He was actually a little shocked. He didn't expect Lin Sun to be able to block his blow. This was because even the king of the 9th tribulation of the longevity realm was no different from a chicken or a dog in front of him, let alone the 7 tribulations of the longevity realm. Below the saint realm, everyone was like an ant. This sentence was not said casually, but Lin Sun had blocked his blow. Moreover, it was a head-on collision. He didn't dodge. Whoosh! His figure flashed and disappeared again. The next moment, he had already appeared behind Lin Sun. He pinched his fingers into a seal and slashed down fiercely, like an ancient god throwing a divine mountain. Boom! It was as if Lin Sun had eyes behind him. A vivid and lifelike shadow suddenly rushed out, filled with the magical and indescribable power of the true dragon law. With a loud bang, the shadow of the Fushi exploded. In the rain of light, Lin Sun was still inevitably hit by the palm print, and his whole body was knocked to the ground. Die! Dark Willow Pool didn't stop and pressed his palm out again. Whoosh! However, at the moment when the palm was thrown out, a snow-white blade suddenly appeared and slashed at Dark Willow Pool's head at an incredible speed. Impermanence slash. Dark Willow Pool's eyes narrowed. He clenched his index finger and flicked it out. Clang! In the deafening collision, the broken blade was bounced away, making an ear-piercing sound. Hey, this treasure is amazing. It can actually block one of my blows. Dark Willow Pool was a little surprised, and the palm he sent out also failed to hit Lin Sun because of the attack of the broken blade. Old man, so you're a fake saint. On the ground, in the midst of the smoke and dust, Lin Sun's figure rushed up. Blood was dripping from the corner of his mouth, and he looked very embarrassed. However, his expression carried a trace of disdain. A true saint was able to condense Saint Tao laws, and their might was formidable and extraordinary. On the other hand, fake saints were only able to grasp the energy of the saint realm, and it was absolutely impossible for them to comprehend and condense Saint Tao laws. Dark Willow Pool was a saint indeed. His strength pressed down onto the sky and caused the surroundings to tremble. However, he hadn't condensed any Saint Tao laws at all. His attack did indeed possess the energy of the laws, but it was the energy of the laws that belonged to the path to longevity. It lacked the aura of a Saint Tao law. You dare to judge the saint realm? Dark Willow Pool's face sank, and he was infuriated. A junior that had only stepped foot into the ultimate king realm dared to look down upon his Saint Tao like this. Lin Sun was too arrogant. Bang! He strode through the sky while his clothes fluttered. He clawed with his palm, and then a golden sun floated up into appearance. It illuminated the sky and emanated a terrifying aura that could incinerate the world. At this point in the battle, Dark Willow Pool was completely at ease, and he wasn't worried about the appearance of the mysterious female saint of legend. Earlier, it was precisely because he was afraid of this that he acted cautiously and probed Lin Sun's strength. If it wasn't for that, Lin Sun would have been dead to Dark Willow Pool a long time ago. At this moment, Dark Willow Pool's eyes narrowed. In Lin Sun's left hand, a big bow that seemed to be made of bones and skeletons appeared. It was rough and ferocious, and the bowstring was bright red, as if it had been soaked in divine blood. When he saw the arrow in Lin Sun's right hand, Dark Willow Pool could no longer keep calm. He cried out involuntarily, Is this blue arrow? The arrow was simple and unadorned, as thick as a child's arm. The feather of the arrow was stained with dark red blood, and the dark tip of the arrow was flowing with a faint cold light. Just in Lin Sun's hand, there was a terrible power spreading from the arrow, oppressing the surrounding void to produce bursting ripples. One bow and one arrow were insignificant bow and blue arrow. In the absolute domain, there was no divine power, so holy treasures couldn't be used. But it was different in the outside world. Buzz, as Lin Sun pulled the bowstring to the full. A strange wave like the cry of a demon suddenly resounded through the world. At this time, Dark Willow Pool woke up from the shock. His face was livid, and his eyes were bursting with undisguised, strong, killing intent. Blue Arrow. As a member of Golden Crow, he would never forget that this was one of the 9 arrows belonging to the ancient E tribe, which had killed many ancestors of Golden Crow. P.S. There will be an update before midnight. Chapter 1360. Go to Hell. With a roar, Wu Luqi held the golden sun in his hands and smashed it out. At that moment, it was like a real sun falling from the sky to destroy the world. The void melted, and the nearby mountains were all burning. Bang! At the same time, a strange whistling sound rang out. The blue sky arrow shot out from the fully drawn bright red bowstring. Between heaven and earth, there was a terrible scene of the galaxy exploding and everything collapsing. Around the insignificant spiritual bow, the scene of the sun sinking and the golden crow crying blood was reflected. It could be seen with the naked eye that the nearby void, dust, light, all fell into destruction in an instant, turning into violent turbulence and roaring. It seemed that this arrow was going to bring everything into a kind of nothingness and completely annihilate it. This scene was too shocking. It was just one arrow. The world was seized by its momentum. Boom! The blue sky arrow, like a divine rainbow, easily pierced the golden sun in the void, causing it to explode and turn into a turbulent flame. The blue sky arrow didn't lose momentum, whistling towards Wu Luqi in the distance. Damn it! Wu Luqi's face suddenly changed. In his opinion, even with the blue sky arrow, it was difficult for Lin Sun to exert the power of this arrow. After all, this man was only a 7th tribulation of longevity realm. But who would have thought that the power of this arrow was completely beyond his expectation? It's the power of that bow that makes the blue sky arrow exert power far beyond my imagination. As a sage, Wu Luqi was so experienced that he instantly judged the reason. Whoosh! His figure flickered, and he moved to the void to dodge. But what made Wu Luqi's hair stand on end was that the blue sky arrow seemed to have a life of its own. It firmly locked on him and whistled towards him like a maggot attached to a bone. I've forgotten that once this arrow is shot, it won't return without seeing blood. Wu Luqi was furious. Puff! Just when Wu Luqi was about to dodge again, he felt a sharp pain in his chest, and a bloody hole was opened by the blue sky arrow. He couldn't help but scream in pain, and his old face became ferocious. It was too weird. He was a saint, but he couldn't even dodge it. How could this blue sky arrow be so terrifying? At that moment, Dark Willow Lake recalled the memorial tablets that were enshrined in the ancestral hall of his tribe. At least half of those memorial tablets had died tragically under the 9 divine arrows of the Dei tribe. There were at least 10 sages who had died under the blue sky arrow, and every one of them had the cultivation of a saint. The most powerful ones even had the battle prowess of a great sage. But in the end, they were all killed by the Jadefall arrows. All of this was sufficient to prove how terrifying the Jadefall arrow was. At the same time, Lin Sun was also surprised. Since entering the ancient desolation realm, he had rarely used the insignificant bow. As for the blue sky arrow, he hadn't used it even once. Unexpectedly, the combination of insignificant bow and blue sky arrow could produce such terrible lethality. The bloodthirsty Queen Zhao Xingye is right. The 9 arrows of the Great E clan are the natural enemies of the Gold Crows. And the insignificant bow is a peerless, murderous weapon. The bloodthirsty queen once said that if you want to find the spirit of the insignificant bow, you can go to the Sunset Tang Valley. In this way, there must be an irreconcilable grudge between the insignificant bow and the Gold Crows. It's a pity that my current strength is not enough to break into the Sunset Tang Valley. Otherwise, I really want to take this opportunity to go there. These thoughts flashed through Lin Sun's mind in an instant. But in his hand, he didn't stop and pulled the bowstring again. Buzz, suddenly, the strange fluctuation like the roar of the gods and demons sounded again. Dark Willow Lake's face changed. He raised his hand and took out a copper hammer, which was flowing with golden thunder and lightning, and smashed it at Lin Sun. This copper hammer was obviously a holy treasure. When it was used in the hands of a sage like Dark Willow Lake, the power it produced was simply earth-shattering. In an instant, the thunderstorm was surging, covering the sky and covering the earth. Thunder and lightning flower buds were condensed in the void, falling down with flowing lightning. Whoosh! The blue sky arrow flew out with a terrible sharpness. It directly broke through the thunder and lightning beams and rushed to Dark Willow Lake. Dark Willow Lake roared and struck with a copper hammer. With a bang, the blue sky arrow was blocked, but he staggered back by the terrible impact. His chest heaved up and down, and he couldn't help coughing up a mouthful of blood. He had suffered a great injury. Dark Willow Lake couldn't believe it. A young man in the 7th retribution of Longevity Realm had the power to hurt him with just a bow and an arrow. It was ridiculous, but the bias happened. Come again. Today I'll shoot the crow with the bow and kill you, old beast. Lin Sun's black hair fluttered, and his bearing was disdainful. The rolling power in his body poured into the insignificant bow like a river. Buzz, the blue sky arrow was put on the fully drawn bowstring again. The wind and thunder were surging, and the gods and demons were roaring. The fierce power shook the world. Dark Willow Lake's face was gloomy and livid to the extreme. A dignified saint had been repeatedly injured by a junior like this. It was simply an extraordinary humiliation, and it almost drove him mad. "I'll kill you," he roared. Of course, the means of sage were not so simple. At this moment, Dark Willow Lake waved his sleeve. Golden rainbows pierced the sky and turned into small, sun-like light balls. There were hundreds of them, densely covering the sky. 1,000 days, burning void. This was the supreme secret method of Golden Crow. It could draw the momentum of Zhou Su. It was a power that only a sage could master. Lin Sun's eyes suddenly narrowed. At this moment, in the Sunset Valley, thousands of miles away, at the bottom of a huge golden fusang tree, there was a prison sealed by the power of countless divine prohibitions. This place had been regarded as a forbidden area of Golden Crow for countless years, because there was an extremely ferocious existence imprisoned here. No matter how many sages of Golden Crow tried to attack, torture, and refine it, they couldn't kill it. They could only suppress it and bind it under the golden fusang tree. At this time, a strange hoarse voice sounded from the depths of the prison. "Blue sky arrow. No, my body. Could it be that my master has come to save me?" This voice seemed to have not spoken for countless years. It sounded very difficult, but everyone could hear that he was very excited. Boom! Suddenly, in the dark prison, a monstrous, murderous spirit rushed out, like a demon that had been silent for thousands of years, awakening at this moment. The golden fusang tree that towered into the sky began to shake violently. The power of the sacred Tao forbidding formation that covered the surroundings of the prison glowed brilliantly, emitting a terrifying force that suppressed the living beings in the prison. Boom! The whole Sunset Valley was alarmed at this moment. For a time, cold voices suddenly sounded. Evil creature, it's been countless years. Still not giving up? Behave yourself. Evil creature, you'll be trapped in this dark prison for the rest of your life until you die. With a loud shout, the power of law danced wildly around the prison, like a divine whip of order, lashing fiercely. Cries of agony could be heard coming from the prison, which was mixed with mad laughter. You bunch of bastards, the thing I hated the most was not being able to kill all of you. Just you wait, when I break free, I'll slaughter your entire clan. His voice was filled with monstrous ferocity and hatred. Pa pa pa. The long whips formed from the power of the laws lashed out fiercely, and the maniacal laughter finally died down. Humph, trying to break free? Your master is long dead. You better give up. Soon enough, the cold voices vanished. Within the prison that was enveloped by darkness, a figure whose skin and flesh had split open sat silently, and his eyes carried a wisp of indescribable loneliness, regret, and disappointment. It's a pity that it's not my master, but a little guy borrowing the power of my body. Forget it. You've finally given me a glimpse of hope after being trapped for thousands of years, so I'll lend you a hand. As soon as he finished speaking, the figure took a deep breath and bit the tip of his tongue. He dipped his finger in the blood and drew complicated runes in the air. Buzz. The runes flowed as if they contained countless mysteries. The next moment, they disappeared out of thin air. Plop! The figure seemed to have been drained of all his strength. He could no longer hold on and lay on the ground. However, there was a trace of satisfaction in his eyes. It's better to have hope than to have no hope. I've been trapped here and waited for thousands of years, 1,000 days burning void. Before the blow fell, Lin Sun's eyes suddenly narrowed, and a strong sense of danger surged in his heart. He judged in an instant that the old crow was crazy and used all his strength. It seems that I can only use... Just when Lin Sun decided to use a trump card, he suddenly saw a dense rune suddenly appearing out of thin air and pouring into the insignificant bow in his hand. Lin Sun's arm suddenly sank. He felt that the insignificant bow seemed to be alive at this moment. A terrible and boundless fierce aura emerged like a volcanic eruption. Little bastard, you can rest in peace now that you've forced me to use my trump card. Go to hell. In the distance, Dark Willow Pool roared with a ferocious and terrible look. Boom! Thousands of balls of light that looked like miniature suns suddenly poured down from the sky. It was like a sun rain. It was so bright and dazzling that the mountains and rivers in all directions were illuminated and burned. Everything seemed to be completely incinerated. This was the power of the 1,000 days burning void, the divine, secret method. At the same time, Lin Sun had no time to react. The fully drawn bowstring suddenly trembled. Bang! The blue sky arrow burst out. Compared with the previous one, the power of this arrow was completely different. It had the monstrous momentum of destroying the universe and opening up the ages. A surging, ferocious aura gushed out along with the arrow. It was like pitch-black ink, smearing the entire world a pitch-black color. The balls of light that were like small suns that were pouring down didn't even have the time to display their might before they were enveloped and drowned by the ferocious aura. All disappeared. This Dark Willow Pool was stiff all over. He widened his eyes and could hardly believe his eyes. This was his strongest divine means, but it was so easily obliterated. Bang! At this moment, a divine arrow had broken through. It was not like an arrow at all, but a sickle in the hand of death, full of fierce chi that was enough to change the color of the universe. It was extremely horrible. How could it be? Dark Willow Pool was so scared that his scalp was numb and his soul almost left his body. Since he stepped into the Saint Realm, he had not experienced the breath of death so close for a long time. Escape. Almost instinctively, he chose to escape without hesitation and operated the method a void moving to the extreme. Unfortunately, he still underestimated the terrible power of this arrow. With a puff, the figure of Dark Willow Pool, who was flashing and moving in the void thousands of meters away, was pierced by an arrow, and his body exploded directly. The rain of blood poured down like a waterfall. It was sad and beautiful like a scarlet picture. A saint was killed by an arrow, and both his body and soul were destroyed. P.S. Send more updates. The foreshadowing of insignificant bow and blue sky arrow finally came in handy. In fact, as early as when Lin Sun entered the absolute summit domain, he arranged the guiding place near Sunset Tang Valley for today's plot. Everyone had a great time watching it, so please be sure to subscribe. Thank you, my friends. Chapter 1361. One arrow killed Wu Willow Chi. Even Lin Sun was surprised. Even if Wu Willow Chi was a pseudo-saint, he was still a terrible existence among the saints. But now, he was directly shot by an arrow, and both his body and soul were destroyed. Lin Sun looked down at the insignificant bow in his hand, and a strange expression appeared on his face. He knew that this bow played an important role in killing Wu Willow Chi. I can't stay here for a long time. Lin Sun didn't have time to think more. He raised his hand to call back the blue arrow, picked up the storage belt and the thunder-like copper hammer that fell from Wu Willow Chi, and hurried away. Whoosh! His figure flickered, running by in chi to cover his breath, and soon disappeared in the distant sky. Ninth priest? Dead? How was it possible? Just a moment later, a group of figures with terrible breath appeared out of thin air. The leader was an old man with a dark face and a sinister expression. He sensed the aura of Dark Willow Chi's death. What shocked him most was that a saint like Wu Willow Chi was blown up, and both his body and soul were destroyed. Did the mysterious saintess kill him? The old man's face was cloudy. Immediately, he waved his hand violently. You go back and report this to the patriarch. I'll go after Lin Sun. Yes, seventh priest. The other figures all realized the seriousness of the problem and took the order. This boy can kill Wu Willow Chi, the ninth priest, and he can certainly threaten me. I can't be greedy and rash in this action. As long as I can catch his trace and prevent him from escaping, it's enough. Let's leave the rest to the others. The old man was Wu Henjia, the seventh priest of Golden Crow Branch. After a little thought, he made a decision. Whoosh! The next moment, Wu Henjia's figure flashed and disappeared out of thin air. Mountains overlapped, peaks converged, and the world was a vast expanse. Whoosh! In front of a canyon, the void flashed, and Lin Sun's figure appeared. He glanced around and floated to the ground. 10 years ago, when he went to the guiding place with Old Toad and Alu, he passed by this place and met Chi Yao here. Lin Sun found a cave and set up a Taoist restriction by himself. Then he breathed a sigh of relief. I need to hurry up and recover my strength, sitting cross-legged on the ground. Lin Sun had a strong premonition that when the outside world knew what he had done in the ancient Desolation Realm, those ancient orthodoxies would definitely take action, like the Heavenly Sword Sect, the Great Kitagarbha Temple, and so on. Crash, taking a deep breath, he began to meditate and recharge his energy. The spiritual energy in his body surged like a great river. Lin Sun was afraid that he wouldn't have such a chance to rest in the following journey, so he had to be fully prepared. At the same time, Lin Sun began to look at the insignificant bow. That year, bloodthirsty Queen Zhao Xingye had reminded him that this bow was a great ominous weapon. It contained an incomparably terrifying aura. When he used it, the higher his cultivation base was, the stronger the backlash would be. From then on, Lin Sun rarely used this bow if it was not necessary. After all these years, he had already stepped into the longevity 7th Tribulation Realm. He was no longer the same as when he was in the lower realm. This time, when he used his bow to shoot Wu Lu Chi with the blue sky arrow, Lin Sun did clearly feel a kind of extremely terrifying power contained in this bow. Especially when he used this bow several times in a row, the fierce aura seemed to wake up and began to rush out. At that time, He had to use all his strength to barely control it and not be devoured by the fierce aura. If not, he would not give Wu Luqi a chance to breathe at that time. He would shoot arrows continuously, which was enough to kill the old crow. But later, when facing Wu Luqi's 1,000 days burning void, Lin Sun suddenly noticed that a dense and strange rune poured into the insignificant bow. It was also at that moment that the fierce aura in the insignificant bow suddenly became extremely docile and could be controlled by Lin Sun. It was also after that arrow was shot that Wu Luqi was killed in one fell swoop. At this time, Lin Sun carefully explored the insignificant bow with his spiritual awareness. It was as if he came to a demonic area covered with fierce aura. The horrible fierce aura surged like the Milky Way. Vaguely, there was the sound of gods and demons weeping blood and saints crying. Lin Sun couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. How many horrifying existences had he killed to accumulate such a frightening murderous spirit? Then Lin Sun noticed that a dense and strange bloody symbol was floating in the surging and boundless ferocious qi, flowing with endless mystery and extremely obscure. This rune was like a dominator, suppressing here and making the endless fierce aura tame, as if it bowed its head to surrender. My little friend, I'm the spirit of insignificant. Since you got this bow, it proves that you and I are destined to be together. In the future, if possible, please take this bow to Sunset Tang Valley. I don't ask you to save me, but I just want to use this bow to kill some old fools. In this way, even if I die, I will be happy. The voice was dry, and in the end, it was filled with uncontrollable anger and killing intent, which made the boundless fierce aura surge and boil. Lin Sun held his breath. At this time, the voice disappeared completely, and all the abnormalities returned to normal. Only the strange and dense rune was suspended in the air. Lin Sun withdrew his spiritual awareness. He had completely understood that when he shot Wu Luqi, he inadvertently got the help of the spirit of insignificant trapped in Sunset Tang Valley. The spirit of insignificant Bao must be the spirit of the insignificant Bao. For a moment, Lin Sun couldn't help sighing with emotion. Bloodthirsty Queen's guess was right. The spirit of the insignificant Bao was trapped in Sunset Tang Valley. As long as it could be found, the power of the insignificant Bao could be fully exerted. 2 hours later, Lin Sun got up, removed the Taoist restriction at the entrance of the cave, looked around a little, and then floated away. Not long after he left, a skinny figure suddenly appeared, and after sizing him up for a moment, he sneered. What a clever way of hiding. Unfortunately, in the eyes of the strong of the Saint Realm, you will still be able to find some clues. The skinny figure was Wu Henjia, the 7th priest of the Golden Crow branch. After a little thought, he crushed a jade talisman, and a white rainbow rose to the sky and disappeared. Wu Henjia waited for a moment, and saw the white rainbow fly back to him. He took it in his hand and turned it into a jade talisman again. In the jade talisman, the timely news was recorded. The 13th heaven priest is going to do it himself. Wu Henjia sized it up and sucked in a breath of cold air. In the Golden Crow branch, only the true sage could serve as the heaven priest. It was said that the sage was like the sky and controlled the fate. Although Wu Luqi and Wu Henjia were sages, they were fake sages and could only serve as priests. Their status was far inferior to that of the heaven priest. The 13th heaven priest was named Wu Xiaotong. In terms of seniority, even Wu Henjia had to call him uncle. He had been in closed-door training for 8,000 years. It seems that the clan also suspects that the mysterious saintess killed the 9th priest, Wu Luqi, so they invited Uncle Wu Xiaotong out. Wu Henjia was thoughtful. At this moment, Wu Henjia's heart skipped a beat. He was keenly aware that a cold and dangerous breath was locked on him. He abruptly turned around and saw a young man standing in the distance. The young man was holding a white bone bow that had been pulled to its limit. On the blood-red bowstring, a blood-stained arrow as thick as a child's arm was aimed at him. Blue arrow? Wu Henjia's eyes widened, and he almost couldn't believe it. Immediately, He took a deep breath and calmed down. His spiritual awareness spread in all directions, and he said coldly, "Young man, let your helper come out. One arrow is enough to kill you." In the distance, Lin Sun looked cold. He had guessed that it would not be a smooth journey and that he would be followed. Therefore, when he left, he deliberately made a detour and came back. Who would have thought that he would actually discover the enemy? "So, the mysterious saintess is not with you?" Wu Henjie said in a low voice. He was deliberately delaying time and was extremely vigilant. He didn't think he was stronger than Wu Luqi. Of course, as a saint, he was not vigilant against Lin Sun, but the terrible existence that was likely to be hiding in the dark. Ho ho! Lin Sun laughed with a kind of indescribable irony. Bang! Without hesitation, the bowstring was pulled, and the blue arrow, like a divine rainbow, pierced through the sky. Ridiculous! Do you really think that a nonentity like you can challenge the power of a saint? Wu Henjie sneered. But right after that, his face stiffened, and his scalp almost exploded, because at this instant, he suddenly sensed the aura of lethal danger. It was not from the mysterious saintess he was afraid of, but Blue Arrow. Not good. He rushed up and was about to dodge. Puff! Unfortunately, he'd lost the initiative. The Jadefall arrow pierced through his body, and then his body suddenly stopped in midair before exploding apart. Before he died, he finally understood how Black Willow Lake had died. It was not the so-called mysterious saintess at all, but the Blue Arrow. No, it was the bow. What a familiar breath. The last trace of Wu Henjie's consciousness saw the insignificant bow still buzzing. For a moment, he understood everything. It was it. At this point, Wu Henjie's consciousness was completely cut off, and he died on the spot. Lin Sun breathed a sigh of relief and put away the insignificant bow and the blue arrow. It was easier to kill Wu Henjie this time than to kill Wu Luqi. The reason for this was the element of surprise. The opponent was so vigilant against the mysterious woman sage that he ignored the terrible, insignificant bow. Lin Sun stepped forward and was ready to collect the spoils. But at this moment, his face suddenly darkened. He quickly retreated, took out the vast universe arc, and flew away. Boom! Just as Lin Sun left, an old and thin palm print suddenly appeared in his original position, with dazzling divine brilliance, and pressed down fiercely. Within a radius of thousands of meters, rocks, vegetation, mountains, void, were all crushed into powder and turned into nothingness. This world seemed to collapse and perish all at once. Chapter 1362. Amidst the sound of destruction, an illusory figure floated out of the scene. It was a skinny young man wearing a gorgeous wide-sleeved robe with a flying sword as a hairpin. He was not handsome, but he exuded a sense of endless majesty. Only the Golden Crow clan knew that this young man was actually an old monster who had been in closed-door training for thousands of years. Wu Xiaotong, the 13th heaven priest of the Golden Crow clan, his status indicated that he was a true saint who controlled the power of the divine Tao. It's useless no matter how fast you run. Wu Xiaotong glanced at the scene, took a step forward, and disappeared into thin air. The aura of the divine Tao has appeared. Far away, two men walk side by side, both wearing a high hat and a wide belt, their sleeves fluttering. Suddenly, a middle-aged man on the left with neat hair and an indifferent expression frowned and looked into the distance. "Senior brother Kuya, someone should be chasing after the same target as us." The middle-aged man's eyes were deep, surging with terrifying sword intent. Yes, it's a true saint. Judging from his aura, he should be from the Golden Crow clan of the Sunset Tang Valley. An old man with a skinny face and a doddering appearance spoke in a hoarse voice. A true saint? The middle-aged man was shocked. "Junior brother Yushio, we should act too. We can't let the heavenly sword fall into the hands of others," Kuya said in a hoarse voice. "Of course." Yushio nodded. Immediately, the two sages from the Heavenly Sword sect teleported away. Kuya, even he can't sit still. A moment later, a black-robed monk appeared. He looked very young, but his eyes were full of vicissitudes. "It seems that I'm not the only one who wants to deal with this man." The black-robed monk sighed softly. It was just to kill a young man on the path of immortality, but they made such a big fuss. It would be somewhat disgraceful if it was spread out. "Fine, I'll go and see what this man is capable of. How could he make so many saints come out and attract the attention of the world?" The black-robed monk's figure flashed and floated away. In the ancient temple of the Great Earth Scripture Temple, an old monk murmured softly, "Senior brother F.A. Zhang, he should have already found the traces of that heretic, right?" In the distance, the outline of a magnificent city appeared in Lin Sun's sight. Whoosh! Lin Sun put away the vast universe arc and looked back. A quarter of an hour ago, after killing Wu Hengjie, he suddenly encountered extreme danger, causing him to choose to escape without hesitation. So far, Lin Sun could roughly conclude that the one who did this must be a true saint. Because that aura was too vast and divine, it was far from something that figures like Wu Willow Lake and Wu Hengjie could compare to. However, Lin Sun was not too afraid. He looked at the huge city that was faintly appearing in the distance. To be honest, if he wasn't in such a dangerous situation, he really wanted to enter the city to rest and relax. In the past 10 years, it had been a long time since he had experienced the aura of the mortal world. Forget it. Lin Sun finally gave up. However, just as he was about to take a detour, a low and pleasant voice resounded in the world. "Young man, if you dare to enter the city, the millions of lives in the city will be lost because of you. You should stop here." Lin Sun's black eyes narrowed slightly. In the perception of his divine sense, he saw a gorgeous chariot appear high in the void. In the chariot, a woman in a palace dress was sitting. Her skin was whiter than snow, and her hair was as black as ink. She was beautiful and had a peerless temperament. "Who are you?" Lin Sun said calmly. "Shang Yi of the Sea Soul Clan." The voice of the woman in the palace dress was pleasant, like pearls falling on a jade plate. Lin Sun replied and landed on the top of a mountain on one side. The mountain wind whistled, making his black hair and clothes flutter. He looked around and said, "You are a saint of the present age. Since you are here, why are you still hiding?" His voice was plain, but it resounded between heaven and earth. "Oh, the soul power of this little bastard is quite good." A light chuckle resounded from within the clouds, and then the layer of clouds there suddenly roiled before a slender, imposing, and mighty figure appeared. It was a man in a white robe, with a golden ring hanging on his left ear, which looked very strange. "Who are you?" Lin Sun asked. "Mo Zhao of the Beast Mountain." The man in the white robe smiled slightly, looking extremely holy. "Remember what you said." Lin Sun glanced at him and then looked to the other side. Over there, a bronze war chariot rumbled through the void. Blood flowed, and energy surged forth. On the war chariot stood a blurry figure that was shrouded in black fog. "Fellow practitioners, I only want the heart of this bastard. The rest is up to you." The figure in the black fog on the battlefield said in a cold voice. Lin Sun didn't ask questions this time. He suddenly felt that there was no need to know who the opponent was. They could all be classified as enemies. In this case, who cared who he was? Lin Sun didn't care, but other people in the field couldn't ignore it. They all recognized that the figure in the black fog on the bronze battlefield was a big shot of the moon-worshipping sect in the sacred place. Holy Protector Xiahou Shui. Anyone else? Lin Sun glanced at Shang Yi of the Sea Soul Clan, Mo Zhao of the Beast Mountain, and Xiahou Shui of the moon-worshipping sect. They were 3 sages. In terms of aura, there was no doubt that they were terrifying. Not bad. Possessing such a cultivation at such an age, and even becoming the #1 expert in the Apex region, suppressing all of his peers is truly shocking. Suddenly, a sonorous voice rang out. Kuya and Yushio of the Heaven-Reaching Sword sect appeared on the battlefield. It was Kuya who spoke. "It's a pity that if you don't become a sage, you're just an ant. No matter how amazing you are, you can't defeat a finger of a sage." Yushio looked indifferent. "That's not necessarily true." Someone said coldly, "Not long ago, this man killed 2 of our saint priests with his own hands. His means are extremely cruel. Along with the voice, Wu Xiaotong's figure appeared in the battlefield. His eyes were like lightning, locking on Lin Sun, who was standing on the top of the mountain. His words surprised all the old monsters present. They knew very well that although the saint priests of the Golden Crow were pseudo-sages, they could not be provoked by those below the saint realm. But now, two pseudo-sages had died in Lin Sun's hands. This was naturally surprising. For a moment, they looked at Lin Sun with a hint of surprise. Was it that mysterious female sage who did it? In the sky, Shang Yi, dressed in a palace costume, walked out of the treasure carriage and asked aloud. As soon as these words came out, the eyes of all the sages present narrowed imperceptibly. The reason why they had not taken action until now was that they were somewhat afraid of this. After all, the incident of turning a saint into a beast 10 years ago had caused a great commotion. As a sage, they could regard Lin Sun as an ant and despise him to the extreme, but they had to be wary of the woman behind him. No, this little beast killed them with his own hands. Wu Xiaotong sighed softly. Everyone, I have a presumptuous request. After killing this little beast, I only want a bow and an arrow from you. I hope you can fulfill my request. Everyone else was expressionless, neither agreeing nor objecting. Seeing this, Wu Xiaotong sneered in his heart and said no more. He had already told them that if anyone dared to intervene later, he would not be polite. We are here to bring back the heavenly sword. Yu Xiu suddenly said, if you think that this sword should not be taken away by us, we can give you some advice later. Although his words were calm, they were full of killing intent. In this case, can I also reserve an item? An inheritance of our great earth temple has fallen into the hands of this boy. I will bring it back. A gentle voice sounded. F.A. Zheng, dressed in a black frock, appeared and instantly became the focus of all the people present. The Great Earth Treasury Temple was one of the best sacred places in the world, and F.A. Zheng was a true sacred monk. A group of sages appeared one after another and blocked all directions. They talked as if Lin Sun did not exist. They even communicated with each other and discussed how to divide up Lin Sun's belongings. Moreover, they kept calling Lin Sun a little beast and a little beast. Such a scene made Lin Sun's heart surge with strong killing intent. Did these old things really think that they could be lawless after stepping into the saint realm? There's nothing to say, little thing. Hand over your belongings one by one, and I'll give you a quick death. Xiao Shui of the Moon Worshipping Sect said coldly. This was undoubtedly an undisguised humiliation. Ho ho, Lin Sun said with sarcasm in his eyes. A group of sages besieged me. Not only are you shameless, but you don't have the guts to do it. I'd like to ask, why don't you dare to do it after talking so much nonsense? All the sages' expressions became cold. Being ridiculed by a junior like this naturally made them unhappy. The most embarrassing thing was that Lin Sun's words hit their vitals. The reason why they had not taken action until now was that they were all afraid and vigilant of the mysterious woman behind Lin Sun. Similarly, they were not allies or friends with each other. Naturally, no one wanted to be the first to take action. The most ridiculous thing is that in addition to you who have revealed your traces, I'm afraid that there are still many shameless old things hiding in the dark. On the edge of the cliff, Lin Sun sneered without a trace of fear. Are you all worried that you'll be whipped and driven away by an animal? This sentence was too heart-wrenching. All of a sudden, the faces of the sages in the field darkened. Everyone's aura suddenly spread, making this part of the world dim. The world was silent. The invisible and terrifying pressure of the sages gathered in this part of the world like a landslide and a tsunami. Such a scene was enough to make any practitioner collapse. Guys, why don't we do it together? Yusho said coldly. Okay, let's do it by ourselves. The others agreed one after another. Their eyes became indifferent, and they regarded Lin Sun as a dead thing. They dared to come out and kill Lin Sun because they had something to rely on. Although they were more or less afraid of the mysterious woman, they could not change their determination to kill Lin Sun. What was more, there were many sages in the field from different forces. Even if the mysterious woman really came out, facing such a situation, Could she block it? P.S. There will be 2 updates tonight. You don't have to wait. Tomorrow's guaranteed update will be released in one go, so that you don't have to wait chapter by chapter.